Morning sky off the coast of Maine was a restless gray, with low clouds sagging over the Atlantic's churning waters. Waves slapped against the sides of Captain Tom Peterson's fishing boat as he and his crew cast their lines into the deep. The men, seasoned by years of hauling in their livelihood from these waters, worked with a practiced rhythm, their voices drowned by the wind and the creak of the wooden deck. It was August 3rd, 2025, a date that would haunt the coastal community forever. The day had begun like any other, with lobster pots and tuna nets dropped overboard. The ocean, vast and indifferent, yielded both plenty and peril. But lately, rumors had spread among fishermen. There were whispers of a massive predator patrolling the deeper waters. Some had seen the dark silhouette cutting through the waves, its dorsal fin slicing the surface like a knife. Others dismissed it as fishermen's gossip, tall tales meant to pass long hours at sea. Captain Peterson wasn't one for stories. He trusted what he could see, smell, and touch. But even he couldn't deny that something strange was afoot. Schools of fish were acting erratically, scattering in frenzied patterns, as if something monstrous lurked below. The first tug on the line that morning seemed ordinary, perhaps a large tuna or a stubborn shark. Peterson grunted as he gripped the rod, the muscles in his arms taut from years of hauling heavy catches. The crew gathered, eyes narrowing as the line cut through the water with impossible strength. Whatever was on the other end was massive. The boat lurched as the creature fought back, pulling against the line with a force that rattled the rigging. Peterson's teeth clenched, sweat beading on his brow as he barked orders for the crew to stabilize the boat. The wind whipped across the deck and the waves grew more aggressive, as though the ocean itself conspired to keep its dark secret hidden. The battle dragged on for about an hour, the rod bending dangerously close to snapping. Peterson's hands were raw and trembling, but he refused to let go. Slowly, painfully, the crew gained the upper hand, hauling the beast closer to the surface. When it finally broke through the waves, a collective gasp swept through the boat. A great white shark, its body sleek and glistening, thrashed violently in the water. It was a monster, nearly 23 feet long, its jaws lined with rows of serrated teeth capable of crushing bone. Scars crisscrossed its hide, a testament to years of survival in the brutal depths of the Atlantic. Blood foamed around its body as it fought to free itself, eyes black and unyielding. The men worked furiously to subdue the shark, using every bit of equipment they had. Steel cables groaned under the strain as the creature was finally hoisted onto the deck, its body slamming down with a thunderous crash. Water and blood pooled around it, the stench thick in the salty air. Captain Peterson approached cautiously, his boots slick against the wet deck. The shark's gills flared, its massive body still twitching with residual energy. Even in death, it radiated power. It was then that Peterson noticed something unusual. A bulge in the shark's midsection, grotesquely swollen and misshapen. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, their earlier triumph replaced by a gnawing sense of dread. Sharks were known to swallow anything in their path, but this was different. Grabbing a knife from his belt, Peterson steeled himself and made the first incision. The blade slid through the tough skin, releasing a putrid stench that turned the men's stomachs. Blood and viscera spilled onto the deck, but it was what emerged next that froze them in place. Small, pale fragments, too familiar to be mistaken for anything else. Panic swept through the crew as they recoiled from the gruesome sight. Peterson's heart raced, his mind struggling to process the horror before him. With trembling hands, he sifted through the remains, each piece confirming what he already feared. The bones were unmistakably human. Days earlier, the entire coastal community had been shaken by the disappearance of a family boat. The vessel, carrying parents and their 2 young children, had set out for a leisurely day on the water. When it failed to return by nightfall, search teams scoured the ocean, finding only debris floating aimlessly in the waves. No sign of the family had been recovered. Until now. Peterson's breath hitched as he recognized what remained of the children's clothing, fragments of a bright yellow life jacket torn beyond recognition. He forced himself to keep going, knowing that whatever answers they could provide to the grieving families rested in this grotesque dissection. The crew stood in stunned silence, their faces pale and eyes wide with disbelief. Fishermen were no strangers to death, but this was different. This was personal, tragic, and incomprehensible. The authorities were notified immediately. Within hours, marine biologists, Coast Guard officials, and forensic experts swarmed the boat, their grim task unfolding under the somber sky. The shark was dissected further, and what they found confirmed the unthinkable. The children had been pulled from the water during the attack, their bodies consumed by the predator. The news sent shockwaves through the community. Parents held their children tighter, fishermen spoke in hushed tones, and the ocean, once a source of life and sustenance, became a place of fear. The discovery made headlines across the country, a grim reminder of nature's relentless power. Experts weighed in, theorizing that the shark's size and aggression were the results of dwindling food sources and environmental changes. The creature had been patrolling the area for weeks, its territory overlapping with popular boating routes, but no explanation could ease the pain of the families who had lost their loved ones. Captain Peterson never returned to those waters. The memory of that day was etched into his mind, a nightmare that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The ocean had always been unpredictable, but now it held a darkness he couldn't face. In the months that followed, stricter safety measures were implemented along the coast. Warning systems were installed and patrols increased. But the scars remained, a testament to the fragile line between humanity and the wild. Although the shark was gone, the echoes of that fateful day lingered. May 13th, 2024. The sun rose over the calm waters of Cape Cod, Massachusetts. The waves stretched far into the distance as boats searched for the day's catch. Among them was Jack Martin, a 52-year-old fisherman who had spent decades working on the ocean. Fishing had been his passion since childhood, and he had made a name for himself in the small coastal town. He set out before sunrise every morning, ready to take on the sea. His boat, a sturdy vessel built for deep-sea fishing, had carried him through many seasons of hard work. Jack and his crew were miles from shore that morning, casting their lines into the deep blue water. The ocean was peaceful, and the salty breeze carried the familiar sounds of seagulls overhead. The men talked quietly, waiting for the fish to bite. Jack stood near the boat's edge, adjusting his gear as he prepared for the next catch. He had done this countless times, but the sea was always unpredictable. As the hours passed, the water remained still, and the fish were not biting. Jack's crew watched, scanning the waves for any movement. Suddenly, a large shadow appeared beneath the surface. It moved swiftly, circling the boat. At first, it was unclear what it was, but the size of the figure was alarming. Jack leaned over, trying to get a better look. Before he could react, the water erupted with force. A massive 17-foot great white shark burst out of the ocean, its powerful body rising above the surface. The impact sent waves crashing against the boat, knocking Jack off balance. In an instant, he lost his footing and fell into the water. The splash was loud, breaking the silence as the sea swallowed him. His crew rushed to the edge, shouting in alarm. The shark was already closing in. As Jack struggled to stay afloat, the predator struck. The shark latched onto his foot, its sharp teeth cutting deep into his flesh. The water turned red as he thrashed, trying to break free. The crew threw a rope toward him, hoping to pull him back. The boat rocked as the men scrambled to help. Jack reached for the rope with all his strength, but the shark was relentless. For a brief moment, he managed to fight back, kicking hard and pulling himself toward the surface. The crew gripped the rope tightly, determined to bring him back. Jack's fingers clung to the side of the boat, and the men pulled with all their strength. It seemed like he might escape, but then the shark returned. It struck again with terrifying speed, dragging him under once more. The struggle between man and beast was violent, and the ocean churned as Jack fought to survive. The crew did everything possible, but the sea had already taken hold of him. The battle was not over, but the waters of Cape Cod had become a place of fear. Jack's crew held the rope with all their strength, refusing to let go. The water thrashed around them as the shark pulled Jack deeper. His arms stretched toward the boat, his body weak from the struggle. The men fought against the weight of the ocean, but the force was too strong. Jack slipped from their grasp as the predator attacked again. The shark tore into his leg, shaking violently before pulling him further below the surface. The sea turned darker as the struggle continued. The crew shouted for help, but they were miles from shore, and no other boats were nearby. The only sounds were the crashing waves and the splashing water as Jack fought against the powerful creature. For a brief moment, the ocean went still. The men scanned the water, hoping to see movement. Then Jack's body reappeared, floating close to the surface. His crew quickly pulled him aboard, laying him on the deck. His injuries were severe, and blood pooled around him as he gasped for breath. The men worked frantically, wrapping cloth around his wounds, but the bleeding was unstoppable. The boat turned toward shore, speeding through the waves in a desperate attempt to get him to safety. The journey back felt endless. The crew did everything they could, but Jack's condition worsened. His breathing slowed, and his body grew weaker with every passing second. The men called for help over the radio, alerting the harbor of the emergency. They pushed the boat to its limits, hoping to reach land before it was too late. As they neared the coastline, paramedics waited at the dock, ready to take over. The crew carried Jack onto the pier, where medics rushed to save him. They worked quickly to stop the blood loss, but the damage was too great. Jack did not survive despite their efforts, and the fishing community lost one of its own that day. The news of the attack spread quickly. Cape Cod, known for its deep waters and rich marine life, had seen shark sightings before, but an incident this severe shook the entire town. Fishermen who had spent years on the water now looked at the ocean with fear. The once peaceful waves carried memories of what had happened. Authorities issued warnings, advising boaters to stay cautious. Experts studied the attack, trying to understand what had drawn the predator so close to a fishing vessel. Some believed the shark had mistaken the movement for prey, while others thought it had been a rare case of aggression. Jack's family and friends mourned his loss, remembering him as a man who loved the sea. His boat remained at the harbor, a reminder of the risks that came with life on the water. The ocean continued its endless movement, but it would never feel the same again for those who had witnessed that day. The waters of Cape Cod now held a story of tragedy, a reminder of the power and danger that lurked beneath the surface. The sun blazed overhead on August 14, 2016, casting a golden shimmer across the turquoise waters off the Florida coast. Todd Harris, freshly 35 and determined to make the most of his birthday, stood at the helm of a rented boat, his grin as wide as the horizon. Music thumped from portable speakers, bass lines thudding in sync with the gentle rocking of the waves. His friends lounged on deck chairs with drinks in hand, their laughter mingling with the salty tang of the ocean and the mouth-watering scent of grilled meat. A cooler filled with ice-cold beers, wine bottles, and an assortment of liquors stood as the centerpiece of the party. Red plastic cups were filled and refilled as the group cheered, danced, and played rowdy drinking games. Todd, always the life of the party, had insisted on bringing a set of cards for high-stakes dares, and by now half the group had forfeited their dignity in comical challenges. One friend was covered in ketchup from a bet gone wrong, while another stumbled around, attempting to balance a bottle on their head. Todd thrived on spectacle. He'd always been the first to dive off cliffs, race jet skis through tight channels, and challenge friends to wild dares. The ocean was his playground, and today was no different. His bravado fueled by celebratory beers, he regaled the group with exaggerated tales of his daring exploits. Sharks? He scoffed at the idea of fearing them. According to him, people just don't understand them. All hype, no bite. A few guests raised eyebrows, but Todd, grinning wide, doubled down on his bravado. The heat and alcohol churned into a heady mix of recklessness. In his mind, it was his moment to cement the legend of his 35th birthday. Without waiting for approval or caution, he stripped down to his swim trunks, stretched dramatically for effect, and cannonballed into the water. The splash sprayed across the deck, earning hoots and cheers from his friends. Todd surfaced with a triumphant whoop, shaking water from his thick dark hair. The ocean enveloped him in its warm embrace. He treaded water confidently, oblivious to the faint warning signs beneath the shimmering surface. The Gulf Stream currents often carried predators closer to shore during the late summer months, and sightings of bull sharks had been reported in the area, but none of that registered in Todd's mind. He was invincible, or at least he thought so. The water, once calm and inviting, suddenly darkened as shadows flickered below. Schools of small fish darted frantically, a telltale sign that something larger was approaching. The shift in the ocean's energy was subtle, but primal. Nature's silent warning went unnoticed by Todd as he floated on his back, arms spread wide in carefree bliss. Then it happened. A sudden, sharp jolt yanked Todd downward. The impact was swift and brutal, as if the ocean itself had come alive and seized him. A searing pain shot through his right foot. His body convulsed, instinctively thrashing against the unseen force. Blood blossomed in the water, a dark cloud swirling around his leg. Panic gripped Todd's chest as he kicked wildly, desperate to free himself. The predator, a bull shark just shy of 8 feet long, clamped down with crushing force. Its serrated teeth tore into flesh and bone, sending shockwaves of agony through Todd's body. On the boat, his friends initially laughed, thinking Todd was pulling another of his infamous stunts. But their amusement quickly faded when they saw the water turn red. Todd's face contorted in pain, his screams barely audible over the crashing waves. The shark released its grip for a split second, giving Todd a fleeting chance to escape. He gasped for air, heart racing, adrenaline surging through his veins. His arms flailed as he fought to stay afloat, but the shark was relentless. It circled back, its sleek body slicing through the water with terrifying precision. Todd kicked with his uninjured foot, desperate to put distance between himself and the predator. Every movement sent fresh waves of pain through his leg. His vision blurred from the intensity of it, but survival instincts drove him forward. The shark struck again, this time clamping down higher on his leg. The force pulled Todd underwater, the world around him turning into a chaotic blur of bubbles and blood. Desperation clawed at his chest as he struggled to break free. The predator's grip was merciless, dragging him deeper into its territory. Todd clawed at the water, lungs burning for air. Images of his friends, the party, and his carefree boast moments earlier flashed through his mind. On the boat, chaos erupted. Guests scrambled to grab ropes and life preservers. One friend frantically revved the engine to maneuver the boat closer. Time stretched agonizingly long as they fought to reach Todd, whose thrashing was growing weaker. A lucky strike from Todd's flailing arm landed on the shark's sensitive gill. The predator released him, momentarily disoriented. Seizing the chance, Todd kicked toward the surface with every ounce of strength he had left. His head broke through the water, gasping and choking for air. The boat was finally within reach. Strong arms pulled him aboard, his body trembling uncontrollably. Blood poured from his mangled foot, pooling on the deck. Todd's skin was ghostly pale, his breaths shallow and ragged. Someone wrapped a towel around his leg, applying desperate pressure to stem the bleeding. Todd's eyes fluttered, shock threatening to pull him into unconsciousness. The boat roared to life, speeding back toward the shore. By the time they reached the marina, an ambulance was waiting. Paramedics worked swiftly, stabilizing Todd as they rushed him to the hospital. The grim reality of the situation settled over the group. Todd's injury was severe, and the chances of saving his foot were slim. Hours later, after a harrowing surgery, doctors confirmed what everyone feared. Part of Todd's foot had to be amputated. The shark's bite had torn through critical tendons and bone, leaving no other option. In the days that followed, news of the attack spread like wildfire. Todd, once the fearless daredevil, became a cautionary tale. Friends jokingly nicknamed him Sharkbait, a title he wore with a mix of humor and resignation. But behind the laughs was a sobering truth. His reckless stunt had nearly cost him his life. The incident served as a reminder of the ocean's unforgiving nature. Sharks, powerful and instinctual predators, demanded respect. Todd's bravado had met its match, and he paid the price. Though he survived, every step he took on his prosthetic foot was a reminder of that fateful day. A birthday celebration turned into a nightmare in the waters of Florida. 16th, 2024. The Pacific shimmered under a bright sun, casting golden streaks across the rolling waves off the coast of Santa Barbara. It was around July, so the summer heat clung to the air. But out on the water, the cool breeze offered a welcome respite. Luke Harris, a 31-year-old surfer, glided effortlessly through the breakers, his body bronzed from years of chasing waves. With each powerful stroke of his arms, he paddled farther away from the crowded shore, leaving behind the clatter of beachgoers. The world around him quieted, replaced only by the rhythm of waves folding over themselves and the occasional call of a seagull high above. For Luke, the ocean had always been more than just a sport. It was a sanctuary. Growing up near these waters, he'd spent countless mornings learning to read the swells, to understand the unspoken language of the sea. Today, the conditions felt almost magical. The horizon stretched ahead, shimmering with promise, as clean sets rolled in with a perfect rhythm. The water was calm, the sky clear, ideal for a day of surfing. Most surfers stayed closer to shore, but Luke found peace in the solitude of the open water. He thrived there, where the only sounds were the waves and his breathing. The ocean was his canvas, and every ride was a fleeting masterpiece, one that existed only for a moment before the next wave took its place. As he paddled further out, he felt the familiar rush of excitement, a reminder that no matter how many times he surfed, the ocean always had something new to offer. He spotted a promising swell rising in the distance. Turning his board, he paddled hard, muscles taut with anticipation. The wave lifted him, and with practiced ease he popped up to his feet. The rush of speed and power beneath him was intoxicating. He carved across the face of the wave, salt spray stinging his skin, completely immersed in the moment. But the ocean, like life, was unpredictable. As the wave began to collapse, Luke angled his board to ride out of the break. Suddenly, from the corner of his vision, a dark shape emerged. A split second later, the surface exploded. The water churned violently as a massive great white shark, at least 14 feet long, surged upward with terrifying force. Its jaws gaped wide, revealing rows of serrated teeth that gleamed in the sunlight. The impact was sudden and brutal. The shark's powerful jaws clamped down on Luke's surfboard, splintering the fiberglass with a sickening crunch. The force knocked Luke backward, and he hit the water hard. Instinct took over as adrenaline flooded his system. He barely managed to pull his legs up, narrowly avoiding the shark's snapping teeth. Time warped into a chaotic blur with Luke kicking frantically and his lungs burning as he fought to stay above the foaming water. The shark thrashed, its tail churning the sea into a frenzy. The sound of cracking fiberglass echoed through the chaos. Luke's board was gripped in the predator's jaws. Desperation ignited a primal instinct. Luke lashed out with his foot, striking the shark hard on its snout. The impact was solid, jarring his ankle, but it had the desired effect. The shark released its grip on the board, momentarily stunned. Splinters of fiberglass floated around them, bobbing like shattered dreams on the churning water. But the encounter was far from over. The shark circled back, its dorsal fin slicing through the water with lethal precision. Luke's breath came in ragged gasps as he scanned the surface, heart pounding in his chest. He knew the rules. Never turn your back on a predator. Fear clawed at the edges of his resolve, but he forced himself to stay focused. Survival was the only option. The great white closed the distance, its sleek body gliding through the water like a missile. Luke knew he couldn't outswim it. His only chance was to make himself appear large and threatening. He spread his arms wide, slapping the water with ferocity. Every fiber of his being screamed for him to flee, but he held his ground, teeth gritted against the mounting terror. The shark hesitated, its black eyes assessing this defiant figure. For a moment, predator and prey were locked in a silent standoff. The water rippled between them, heavy with tension. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the shark veered off, its body twisting gracefully before vanishing into the depths. Luke remained frozen, every muscle taut, waiting for the telltale shadow to reappear. The seconds dragged on, each one an eternity. But the ocean returned to its eerie calm, as if the violent encounter had never happened. The only evidence was the wreckage of his surfboard and the wild thudding of his heart. With his breath still ragged, Luke began paddling toward shore. His arms trembled with exhaustion, but he refused to stop. The beach, once a strip of golden sand, now seemed impossibly far. Each stroke was a battle against the weight of fear and fatigue. By the time his feet touched the sandy bottom, Luke collapsed onto his knees, gasping for air. The world tilted around him, the adrenaline finally ebbing, leaving him weak and shaken. Salt water dripped from his hair, mixing with the sweat on his face. His shattered surfboard washed up beside him was a harsh reminder of how close he had come to death. Beachgoers had gathered with their faces pale with shock. Some pointed at the jagged remains of his board, and others whispered in hushed tones. But Luke heard none of it. The roar of the ocean still echoed in his ears, drowning out the world. In the days that followed, the encounter became the stuff of local legend. News outlets picked up the story, and social media buzzed with debates about the risks of surfing in shark-infested waters. Marine experts weighed in, citing the increasing number of shark sightings along the California coast. But for Luke, none of it mattered. The ocean had always been his refuge, a place of freedom and adventure. But now, it was tinged with something darker, a reminder that nature was both beautiful and brutal, indifferent to human existence. The scars on his body would fade, but the memory of that great white, its cold eyes fixed on him, would linger forever. Luke Harris would return to the waves, but he would never forget the day the ocean showed its teeth. On the morning of June 17, 2023, the Pacific Ocean off the coast of British Columbia stretched wide and glassy, shimmering under a pale sky. A solitary fishing boat cut through the calm water, its motor humming steadily. Tom Patterson, a seasoned fisherman with weathered hands and a face permanently tanned by salt and sun, stood at the helm. The boat rocked gently beneath his boots as he steered toward a favorite fishing spot where the salmon often ran thick. Tom had spent nearly half his life on these waters, navigating their moods and marveling at their wild beauty. He loved the solitude, the way the sea could silence the world and leave him alone with nothing but the rhythm of waves. Today felt promising. The kind of day when the fish practically leaped into the boat. He had left the dock before dawn, armed with a thermos of black coffee and enough bait to last until sunset. As he neared the fishing grounds, Tom cut the engine, letting the boat drift. The usual cries of seabirds were conspicuously absent. The water, typically bustling with life, seemed unnerving still. Tom furrowed his brow but brushed off the unease. Sometimes the ocean had its quiet moments. He prepared his lines, casting them into the depths with practiced ease. Minutes turned into an hour and still, nothing. Tom sipped from his thermos, eyes scanning the horizon. Then, without warning, the surface of the water shattered. Black and white dorsal fins sliced through the waves, sleek and powerful. A pod of orcas had surfaced nearby, their glossy bodies gleaming in the morning light. Tom's breath caught. Despite decades on the water, he never grew tired of seeing these magnificent creatures. They moved with such grace, their presence both commanding and mesmerizing. He watched as they glided closer, their exhalations misting the air. There were at least 6 of them, including a calf that swam closely alongside a larger adult. Tom's admiration turned to apprehension when one of the orcas broke away from the pod. It moved with purpose, heading straight for his boat. The water churned in its wake, and a sudden ripple of unease prickled Tom's skin. He had heard stories, rare but chilling, of orcas displaying aggressive behavior toward boats. The orca's speed was astonishing. In a matter of seconds, it was upon him, ramming the side of the boat with a force that sent Tom staggering. The vessel rocked violently, water sloshing over the sides. Tom gripped the railing, heart pounding. Another hit followed, harder this time, causing the boat to lurch dangerously. Tom's instincts kicked in. He scrambled to the helm, desperate to restart the engine and steer away from the pod. His fingers fumbled with the ignition as the orca struck again. The boat tipped sharply and Tom lost his footing. The world tilted and then he was airborne, flung over the side and into the cold, unforgiving water. The shock of the frigid ocean stole his breath. He kicked frantically, breaking the surface and gasping for air. The boat bobbed several yards away, its engine sputtering uselessly. Panic clawed at Tom's chest as he spotted the orcas circling him, their dorsal fins cutting through the water like blades. One of the orcas veered toward him, its massive body slicing through the waves with terrifying speed. Tom thrashed, trying to swim back to the boat, but the creature was too fast. It struck him from below, knocking the wind from his lungs and sending him spinning through the water. He was dazed, his mind a haze of confusion. His limbs were heavy, sluggish, like lead, as the cold stole his strength. The orca circled again, its dark eye gleaming with a chilling intelligence that was as mesmerizing as it was terrifying. Without warning, another strike landed, this time against his side. Pain radiated through his ribs, and he was thrust violently through the water. Desperation fueled Tom's movements. He clawed at the waves, his lungs burning. The boat was too far now, a distant silhouette against the endless expanse of blue. The orcas were relentless, their strikes calculated and brutal. Each impact sapped more of his energy until his kicks became feeble and uncoordinated. One final hit drove him beneath the surface. The water closed over his head, dark and cold. Tom's vision blurred, his body battered and broken. He fought against the pull of the deep, but his strength was gone. Bubbles escaped his mouth, rising toward the distant shimmer of daylight. As his consciousness faded, fleeting images flickered through his mind. The warmth of the sun on his face, the taste of coffee, the laughter of friends at the dock. And then, there was nothing. Hours later, a search and rescue team arrived, alerted by a distress call from a passing vessel that had spotted the damaged boat adrift. The crew scanned the water, their faces grim. Debris floated on the surface. Tom's thermos, a shattered fishing rod, and fragments of the boat's railing. It wasn't long before they found him. His body, battered and lifeless, floated near the wreckage. The orcas had long since vanished, their presence marked only by the scars they had left on the boat, and the man who had dared to share their domain. The news of Tom's death sent shockwaves through the fishing community. He had been a respected and experienced fisherman, a man who knew the sea better than most. The idea that orcas, usually regarded as majestic and intelligent creatures, had turned deadly was both shocking and sobering. Marine experts were called in to investigate. They theorized that the pod had been agitated, possibly defending a calf or reacting to the proximity of the boat. Whatever the reason, the attack served as a grim reminder of the ocean's unpredictability and the raw power of its inhabitants. Tom's family held a memorial service on the dock, where he had spent so many mornings preparing for his fishing trips. Friends and fellow fishermen gathered, their faces lined with grief. Flowers were cast into the water, their colors bright against the dark waves. Tom's story is nothing but a cautionary tale that even the most seasoned mariners are not immune to the untamed forces of nature. The sun glinted off the shimmering waters of Sarasota, Florida. The air was thick with salt and humidity, the scent of the sea ever present. Kevin Matthews, 41 years old and a seasoned fisherman, stood at the bow of his modest fishing boat, his line cast deep into the turquoise expanse. The soft hum of distant waves lapped against the hull as the boat rocked gently, a rhythm Kevin had grown to love over years spent on these waters. Fishing was Kevin's escape from the chaos of everyday life. The stillness, the pull of the line, and the occasional thrill of a catch brought him a peace he rarely found on land. That day, May 30th, 2023, had started as no different from any other trip. He'd left the marina just after dawn, eager to make the most of the calm weather and the abundant spring fish population. By mid-morning, Kevin had already filled his cooler with snapper and grouper. The sun climbed higher, glistening off the surface of the ocean, and beads of sweat trickled down his neck. His muscles tensed as he felt a sudden tug on the line. Whatever was on the hook was strong, pulling hard against him. Kevin braced himself, his boots firm on the deck, and began the battle. The fish thrashed below, creating splashes that shattered the otherwise calm waters. With steady determination, Kevin reeled it closer, the fight surging through his veins like an adrenaline rush. After several grueling minutes, he hauled the shimmering grouper over the side of the boat. The creature flopped wildly on the deck, its scales catching the sunlight. Kevin grinned through the exertion, sweat dripping from his brow. Blood pooled on the deck as Kevin wrestled the fish free from the hook. He barely noticed the crimson trail that dripped through the scuppers and mingled with the sea below. The moment was filled with the satisfaction of a hard-won catch, until the ocean beneath him seemed to shift. A shadow sliced through the water, swift and ominous. Kevin didn't see it at first. His attention was focused on tossing the fish into the cooler. But the ocean surface rippled unnaturally, a warning from the depths. Then, without warning, the shadow exploded upward. The bull shark struck with terrifying speed and force, its massive jaws clamping onto Kevin's leg. Pain ignited through his body, sharp and overwhelming. The sheer weight of the 15-foot predator yanked him off balance, and before he could react, he was dragged over the side of the boat and into the churning water. Salt water filled Kevin's mouth as he thrashed against the pull of the shark. Its powerful body twisted violently, sending waves crashing around them. The water turned dark with blood, clouding his vision. Kevin's instincts kicked in. Survival was the only thought that remained. He kicked frantically with his free leg, his fist pounding against the shark's rough hide. The predator's skin felt like sandpaper, shredding the skin on his knuckles with every desperate blow. The shark's jaws clamped tighter, and Kevin screamed into the water, his voice lost to the chaos. The predator shook its head violently, dragging Kevin deeper. His lungs burnt for air, and panic clawed at his chest. But Kevin was a fighter, he always had been. Adrenaline surged through his veins, dulling the pain as he reached for the only weapon he had, his own will to live. With a burst of strength, Kevin drove his thumb into the shark's eye, pressing with every ounce of power left in his body. The shark recoiled, its grip loosening for a split second. Kevin seized the chance, kicking free and propelling himself toward the surface. His head broke through the water, and he gasped for air, choking on salt. The boat was only a few yards away, but it might as well have been miles. Blood streamed from his mangled leg, leaving a crimson trail that would surely attract the shark again. Kevin knew he had no time to waste. The predator circled back, its dorsal fin slicing through the water. Kevin's arms flailed as he fought against the waves, each stroke agony. The boat loomed closer, but the shark was gaining on him. The predator's cold eyes glinted beneath the surface, filled with relentless hunger. Kevin's vision blurred as he kicked weakly, his body on the verge of collapse. The shark closed the distance, jaws gaping wide. Desperation drove Kevin to twist his body and thrust his foot forward. His heel connected with the shark's snout, a desperate blow that bought him a precious second. With one final, agonizing push, Kevin reached the side of the boat. His fingers gripped the slick edge and he heaved himself upward, muscles screaming in protest. The shark surged beneath him, its body brushing against the hull. Kevin's friends, who had been frozen in horror, snapped into action, grabbing his arms and hauling him aboard. He collapsed onto the deck, his chest heaving and his body trembling uncontrollably. Blood pooled beneath him, staining the white fiberglass. His leg was a mangled mess of torn flesh and shredded muscle, the extent of the damage obscured by the steady flow of blood. The boat's engine roared to life as they sped back toward the marina. Kevin drifted in and out of consciousness, his mind a haze of pain and shock. The world around him blurred into a chaotic mix of shouts, the thrum of the engine, and the sting of salt in his wounds. By the time they reached the dock, an air ambulance was waiting. Paramedics worked frantically to stabilize Kevin, their faces grim as they assessed his injuries. He was airlifted to the hospital where a team of surgeons fought to save his leg. In the days that followed, Kevin's story made headlines. The attack was described as one of the most harrowing encounters in recent memory. Experts speculated that the blood from his catch had drawn the bull shark, setting the stage for the near-fatal encounter. Kevin survived, but his life was forever changed. His body bore the scars of that brutal fight, a testament to the raw, untamed power of the ocean. Yet despite the trauma, he carried within him a fierce gratitude for the chance to live another day. A man who had faced death in the depths and emerged broken but alive. The sun had just started to rise over the Florida Keys, casting a soft glow on the endless stretch of water. Mark Delaney, a 42-year-old seasoned sailor, stood alongside his crew at the helm of his trawler, the Sea Spirit. They were about 15 miles offshore, where the water was deep and the fishing was usually good. Mark had spent most of his life on these waters and nothing surprised him anymore. But that morning would be different. Mark and his crew, Tom Vargas, a wiry deckhand in his 30s, and Jake Lawson, a younger man learning the ropes, were hauling in their nets after an uneventful night. They were tired but ready to return to shore with their modest catch. Mark noticed something odd floating about 50 yards ahead as he steered the boat north. It wasn't the usual driftwood or seaweed. This looked different, bigger. Mark squinted, trying to make sense of the shape bobbing in the gentle waves. It looked like debris, maybe part of a capsized boat or a large piece of equipment, but something felt off. He slowed the boat and Tom grabbed a pair of binoculars. Tom's face paled. He handed the binoculars to Mark without saying a word. Mark raised them to his eyes and felt his stomach drop. He thought debris was a man's upper body, face down, floating in the water. His wetsuit was shredded and his lower half was completely gone. Blood mixed with the seawater, leaving a dark, cloudy trail. Mark recognized the logo on the man's wetsuit sleeve. It belonged to Blue Horizon Dive Shop, a well-known place in Key Largo. That's when it hit him. During a deep-sea exploration dive, Ryan Calloway, a 27-year-old diver from that shop, had been reported missing 2 days ago. No one had found any trace of him, until now. Mark's heart raced. He shouted for Tom and Jake to help him pull the body closer, but the water around them stirred as they edged the boat forward. The calm surface suddenly rippled with movement. Then, without warning, a powerful force slammed into the ship's side, nearly knocking Mark off his feet. The boat rocked violently. Tom stumbled, grabbing the railing to prevent him from falling overboard. Jake, wide-eyed and frozen, pointed toward the water. Mark followed his gaze and saw fins slicing through the surface and circling the boat. Not just one fin, but several. The largest was massive, easily belonging to a great white shark over 20 feet long. Another hard bump shook the boat. Mark staggered back from the edge, shouting at Tom to radio for help. The ship wasn't built to withstand repeated hits like that. They needed backup and fast. Tom fumbled with the radio, his hands shaking. Mark could hear the static crackle as he tried to reach the Coast Guard. But the sharks weren't waiting. The largest of them surfaced briefly, its massive jaws gaping, revealing rows of sharp teeth stained with fresh blood. Mark realized with horror that the shark wasn't done feeding. It wanted more. The crew scrambled to secure the boat, trying to keep it steady as the sharks continued their assault. The great white slammed into the hull again, leaving deep dents in the metal. Mark could hear the groaning of the boat's structure under the pressure. Another hit like that, and they could be in serious trouble. Tom's voice finally broke through on the radio, reaching the Coast Guard and explaining their position and the terrifying situation. But help was at least an hour away. Mark knew they had to stay calm, but the fear was suffocating. The sharks circled closer, their fins cutting through the water like blades. Every time one disappeared beneath the surface, Mark's heart pounded harder, waiting for the next hit. The tension was unbearable. Suddenly, the water churned violently near the stern. The crew turned just in time to see the great white lunge upward, its enormous body breaching the surface. It clamped its jaws around the remains of Ryan Calloway, yanking what was left of him beneath the waves. The water turned dark with blood and the shark was gone, vanishing into the depths as quickly as it had appeared. For a brief moment, everything was still. The crew stood in stunned silence, staring at the blood-streaked water. Then, without warning, another hard bump rocked the boat, snapping them back to reality. The sharks were still out there, and now they were agitated. Mark ordered everyone to the boat's center, away from the edges. They needed to stay as far from the water as possible. The minutes crawled by, each one feeling like an eternity. Every small sound, the creak of the boat, the splash of a wave, made Mark flinch. After what felt like hours, the distant hum of a helicopter broke through the tension. The Coast Guard was finally arriving. A patrol boat sped toward them, cutting through the waves with urgency. The crew waved frantically, signaling their position. As the Coast Guard vessel approached, the sharks began to retreat, slipping back into the deep. The great white was the last to disappear. Its massive fin was the final reminder of the nightmare they'd just endured. The Coast Guard secured the area and pulled alongside the Sea Spirit. Mark and his crew were shaken but unharmed. The officers boarded the trawler, their faces grim as Mark explained what had happened. They took notes, documenting every detail. But the horror in their eyes showed they understood just how close the crew had come to disaster. Later that day, marine biologists arrived to investigate. They confirmed that the shark responsible was one of the largest great whites ever seen in the area. It wasn't just a chance encounter. The shark had been hunting, and its aggression was likely fueled by dwindling food sources in the region. News of the incident spread quickly, sending shockwaves through Florida's fishing and diving communities. The idea that a great white of that size was actively hunting in local waters was enough to spark fear in even the most experienced sailors and divers. And beneath the waves, the great white still lurked somewhere out there, bigger, hungrier, and waiting. On June 7, 2024, the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico shimmered under the bright afternoon sun. A group of tourists had gathered for a scenic boat ride, eager to experience the beauty of the open sea. Among them was 29-year-old Anna Williams, a travel enthusiast from Texas who had always loved the ocean. She had spent years exploring different coastal destinations, capturing every special moment with her camera. This trip was another adventure for her, and she was excited to take in the breathtaking views of the vast blue waters. The boat moved smoothly across the waves, offering the group a peaceful escape from the city's noise. The air smelled of salt, and the sound of seagulls filled the sky. Everyone on board enjoyed the ride, some taking photos while others simply relaxed, feeling the cool breeze against their faces. The Gulf of Mexico was known for its rich marine life, and spotting dolphins or sea turtles was a common delight for visitors. However, beneath the surface, dangers also lurked. Anna, eager to get the perfect picture of the endless horizon, stepped closer to the edge of the boat. She carefully adjusted her camera, leaning slightly over the railing to capture the sun's reflection on the water. The waves rolled gently, creating a rhythmic motion that made the moment calm and peaceful. But without warning, the tranquility was shattered. From the ocean's depths, an enormous great white shark, measuring an estimated 18 feet long, surged upward with astonishing speed. In seconds, the predator reached the surface and struck with incredible force. The shark latched onto Anna's arm, its powerful jaws closing around her as she screamed in horror. The sudden attack sent a wave of panic through the group, freezing everyone in place. Anna's scream echoed across the water as she struggled against the beast's grip. The boat rocked slightly as others rushed to help, but the shark's strength was overwhelming. The captain, realizing the urgency, steered the boat closer in an attempt to intervene. The once calm ocean had turned into a scene of chaos, with splashes and frantic movements disturbing the surface. As the group watched in terror, the shark dragged Anna off the boat and into the water. The force of the pull was too strong and she disappeared beneath the surface. The captain quickly called for emergency assistance, hoping help would arrive on time. The passengers looked on helplessly, their hearts pounding as they searched the water for any sign of her. The ocean remained still for an eternity, except for the gentle ripples caused by the boat's movement. Everyone's fear was evident as they struggled to process what had happened. The silence was haunting, broken only by the sound of the waves. The realization set in. Anna was gone. The once joyful trip had turned into a nightmare, and no one knew what would happen next. The boat floated silently as the passengers stood frozen, staring at the empty water. The blue surface stretched endlessly, hiding the terrifying scene that had just unfolded. The group remained motionless, unable to believe what had happened. The realization that Anna was no longer there filled the air with a heavy sense of shock. Some passengers scanned the waves, hoping for movement, but the ocean gave no answers. Still gripping the wheel tightly, the captain tried to steady his voice as he called for assistance. The radio crackled as he sent an urgent distress signal, reporting the attack and requesting immediate help. The group of tourists huddled together, their faces pale with fear. Some gripped the railing, their hands shaking as they searched the endless blue for any sign of Anna. But the water remained still as if nothing had happened. The minutes passed slowly, each one dragging on longer than the last. The passengers whispered to one another, their voices filled with disbelief. No one had expected danger on what was supposed to be a peaceful trip. The shock of seeing the attack had left them feeling helpless. The bright afternoon sun continued to shine, casting a cruel contrast to the horror they had just witnessed. A few passengers pointed to the distance as the boat drifted, hoping Anna would resurface. But deep down they knew the truth. The shark had struck with such force that there was little chance of survival. Anna's body was never recovered, lost beneath the vast waters of the Gulf. The realization hit the group hard. Some broke down, unable to hold back their emotions. The exciting trip had begun with excitement and turned into an unthinkable tragedy. When emergency responders arrived, they quickly assessed the situation. Other boats had also been alerted, and they searched the nearby waters, hoping to find any trace of Anna. The area was scanned thoroughly, but the ocean had already hidden all evidence of the attack. With no sign of her, the search teams could do little but inform authorities of the incident. Warnings were issued to other boats, and the Coast Guard monitored the waters closely. The news of the attack spread quickly. Reports detailed the terrifying moment when Anna was pulled into the sea. People in the local community were shocked, as shark attacks were rare in this region. The event left many questioning the risks of open water activities. Scientists reminded the public that sharks do not intentionally hunt humans, but the incident left many uneasy. Back on shore, the passengers struggled to process what had happened. The tragedy had left a lasting impact on everyone who had been on that boat. Some vowed never to return to the ocean, while others found it difficult to forget the sight of the attack. The once peaceful waters now carried the memory of what had occurred, a reminder of how quickly nature could turn from calm to deadly. The morning of May 12, 2024, started like any other for Ben Carter and his friends. They had planned this fishing trip for weeks, eager to escape their usual routines and spend a day on the open water. At 32 years old, Ben worked as a mechanic in La Ceiba, Honduras. His two closest friends, Javier Morales and Luis Ortega, were teachers at a local school. The three had grown up together, sharing a love for fishing that returned to their teenage years. They set out early just after sunrise from the small marina in La Ceiba. Their boat, an old but sturdy vessel named Mar Azul, was stocked with everything they needed: fishing rods, coolers packed with snacks and drinks, and enough bait to last the whole day. The plan was to head about 15 miles off the northern coast of Honduras, near the Mesoamerican Barrier Reef, where tuna were known to gather. The weather was perfect for fishing. The sea was calm, and the sun was just warm enough without being too hot. They laughed and joked as they navigated deeper waters, the coastline fading behind them. By mid-morning, they found a promising spot and dropped anchor. The rods were baited, and the men soon settled in, waiting for the first bite. Hours passed. They chatted about work, family, and plans for the future. Ben was thinking about proposing to his girlfriend, Maria, and his friends teased him, saying he was finally growing up. The light mood filled the boat as they waited, occasionally checking the lines, but no fish bit. It wasn't until early afternoon that things started to change. Luis was the first to notice the sudden tug on one of the lines. The rod bent sharply, and the reel spun fast, screaming as something big fought on the other end. The three men sprang into action. Javier grabbed the rod while Ben and Luis worked together to steady him. Whatever was on the other end of that line was strong. Minutes turned into hours as they struggled to reel in the fish. Sweat dripped down their faces, and their muscles burned from the effort. Finally, after what felt like forever, the dark, glistening shape of a large tuna came into view, thrashing against the pull of the line. They cheered, relieved that their patience had finally paid off. But their celebration didn't last long. As they prepared to haul the tuna onto the boat, Ben noticed a shadow moving beneath the water's surface. At first, he thought it was just the fish struggling, but then he saw it clearly. A large hammerhead shark, its distinct, wide-set head cutting through the water like a blade. The shark circled the boat, its eyes fixed on the helpless tuna on their line. At first, the men were excited. It wasn't every day you saw a hammerhead up close, and they figured it would pass by once they realized the tuna was out of reach. But the shark didn't leave. Instead, it grew more aggressive, circling closer and faster with each pass. Its massive body glided beneath the surface, and the sunlight reflected off its sleek skin, giving it an eerie, ghost-like appearance. Suddenly, the shark lunged at the boat. The impact rocked Mar Azul violently, nearly knocking Luis off his feet. The men shouted in shock, scrambling to keep their balance. The shark wasn't just interested in the tuna. It seemed fixated on the boat itself. Ben, determined to keep the fish they'd worked so hard to catch, leaned over the side trying to retrieve the line quickly. But before he could pull it in, the hammerhead struck again, hitting the boat with such force that Ben lost his footing. His body pitched forward, and he tumbled headfirst into the water before he could grab the edge. Panic erupted on the boat. Javier and Luis shouted his name, but Ben was already submerged, the cold water closing around him. As he surfaced, gasping for air, he felt something slam into his side. The shark had found him. The hammerhead's powerful jaws clamped onto Ben's left leg, the pain shooting through his body like fire. He screamed, thrashing wildly, trying to break free, but the shark was too strong. It shook him violently, dragging him under the surface. Ben's vision blurred as salt water filled his mouth and nose. On the boat, Javier and Luis watched in horror as their friend disappeared beneath the waves. Without thinking, Javier grabbed a rope and threw it into the water, shouting for Ben to grab hold. Luis, meanwhile, grabbed a wooden oar, ready to fight off the shark if it got too close to the boat again. Ben's instincts kicked in. Despite the searing pain in his leg, he reached out, his fingers brushing against the rope. With all his strength, he managed to grab hold, clutching it tightly as the shark tried to pull him deeper. Javier and Luis pulled with everything they had, their muscles straining as they fought to save their friend. The shark wasn't ready to give up. It lunged again, its wide, flat head slamming into Ben's side, knocking the wind out of him. But at that moment, Luis swung the oar with all his might, striking the shark on its sensitive snout. The impact stunned the predator long enough for Ben to be hauled out of the water and back onto the boat. Ben collapsed onto the deck, his body trembling from shock and blood loss. His leg was a mess. Deep gashes ran from his thigh to his knee, and blood poured from the wounds, pooling on the floor of the boat. Javier ripped off his shirt and pressed it against the worst of the injuries, trying to slow the bleeding. Luis radioed for help, his voice shaking as he gave their coordinates to the Coast Guard. Minutes felt like hours as they waited for rescue. Ben drifted in and out of consciousness, his face pale and his breathing shallow. Javier and Luis did their best to keep him awake, talking to him and urging him to hold on. The fear in their eyes matched the terror in Ben's. Finally, after an eternity, they saw the rescue boat approaching. The Coast Guard wasted no time, lifting Ben carefully onto a stretcher and rushing him back to shore. He was taken to a hospital in La Ceiba, where doctors worked through the night to save his leg. The wounds were severe, but thanks to his friend's quick actions, Ben survived. But survival came with a cost. The physical scars would heal with time, but the mental wounds ran deeper. Ben couldn't shake the image of the hammerhead's cold, unblinking eyes or the feeling of those powerful jaws clamping down on his leg. The ocean, once a place of peace and adventure, now filled him with dread. On April 25, 2022, the sun rose over the calm waters of Sarasota, Florida. The sky was clear, and the sea reflected shades of blue and gold. Rachel Harmon, a 30-year-old paddleboarding enthusiast, had always loved the ocean. She had spent her childhood near the coast, fascinated by the waves and the life beneath them. She had moved to Florida a few years earlier, drawn by its warm climate and beautiful beaches. The ocean felt like home to her, and she spent most mornings on the water, enjoying the peace it brought. Rachel was an experienced paddleboarder. She had practiced the sport for years and knew how to handle herself on the waves. She was excited to be out on the water with her friends that morning. They had all gathered at the shoreline early, carrying their boards and chatting about the perfect conditions. The waves were small, and the air was still. It was the kind of morning that made paddleboarding feel effortless. As Rachel paddled further out, she enjoyed the stillness around her. The only sounds were the gentle splash of her paddle and the occasional call of seabirds overhead. She loved these quiet moments when the world felt far away. She felt free, moving smoothly over the surface, her board gliding through the water. Her friends were not far behind, enjoying their time on the waves. Everything felt perfect. Rachel and her friends did not know that something was moving below them. A 15-foot tiger shark lurked in the deep, its large body barely visible in the clear water. It had been swimming in the area, searching for food, and Rachel's presence had caught its attention. The movement of her board and the soft splashes of her paddle were enough to draw the predator closer. The shark circled, watching, waiting. Then, in an instant, it struck. Without warning, the shark surged upward. Its powerful jaws latched onto the underside of Rachel's paddleboard, knocking her off balance. She barely had time to react before she was thrown into the water. The impact shocked her, but she felt something strong grab her leg before she could swim back to her board. The shark's teeth sank deep into her flesh, pulling her downward with incredible force. Rachel thrashed, struggling to free herself, but the grip was too strong. Her friends turned toward the sound of splashing and saw Rachel disappear beneath the waves. Panic spread through the group. They shouted her name, paddling frantically toward the spot where she had been. For a brief moment, Rachel resurfaced, gasping for air. But the shark was relentless. It thrashed violently, dragging her under again. The water churned as the struggle continued. Her friends could only watch in horror, unable to reach her in time. As the ocean settled, Rachel was gone. The only sign of the attack was the rippling water and the drifting paddleboard. Her friends called for help, but deep down they feared the worst. Rachel's friends continued to search the water, their hearts pounding as they scanned the surface. The waves had settled, but there was no sign of Rachel. The ocean that had felt so peaceful moments before now seemed vast and terrifying. One of her friends paddled toward her drifting board, hoping she would appear, but the silence around them was heavy. The minutes felt endless as they waited, calling her name and hoping she would emerge. The emergency services were contacted, and a search operation began. Lifeguards arrived first, quickly scanning the area. Boats moved through the water, their engines breaking the silence. Helicopters flew overhead, searching for any sign of movement below. Every second that passed made it clear how serious the situation was. The ocean was unpredictable, and the power of the predator was undeniable. As the search continued, rescuers spotted something in the distance. Floating debris from Rachel's paddleboard was recovered, and soon after they found more evidence of the attack. Her body was later found severely disfigured. It was a heartbreaking discovery that confirmed what her friends had feared, and the calm morning had turned into a nightmare. News of the attack spread quickly. Sarasota, known for its beautiful beaches and popular paddleboarding spots, was shaken. Locals and tourists alike felt the impact of what had happened. Shark attacks in the area were rare, making this event even more shocking. Authorities immediately warned people to stay out of the water while experts studied the situation. Signs were placed along the shoreline, and officials monitored the coast for more sightings. Marine biologists explained that sharks do not usually target humans, but sudden movements in the water can trigger an instinctive response. The splashes made by Rachel's fall and struggle may have caused the shark to react aggressively. Experts reminded people to stay aware of their surroundings while in the ocean, even in familiar waters. Rachel's family and friends were devastated. They spoke about her love for the sea and her joy in being on the water. She had always been careful and aware, but nature is unpredictable. Her loss was deeply felt, not only by those who knew her, but also by the entire community. A memorial was held on the beach where people gathered to remember her. Flowers were placed in the water, drifting with the tide as a tribute to her life. The attack raised safety concerns, leading to discussions on how to prevent similar incidents. Researchers studied shark behavior in the area, and local authorities considered new safety measures. Some suggested limiting water activities during certain hours, while others recommended increased monitoring. The ocean remained the same, its waves rolling onto the shore as always. But for those who knew Rachel, it would never feel the same again. The beauty of the water now reminded them of the power that lay beneath. The memory of that morning would stay with them forever. The morning had started like any other for Rachel Morgan, a 32-year-old experienced diver from Cape Town, South Africa. She and her team were set to explore the reefs off the coast near Gansbaai, an area famous for its rich marine life and for being one of the great white shark hotspots in the world. Rachel wasn't new to diving in shark-prone waters. She had done it dozens of times before, always respecting the ocean and its inhabitants. But nothing in her years of diving could prepare her for what would happen that day. It was February 18, 2024, and the weather was ideal for a dive. The sky was clear, and the water visibility was excellent. Rachel and 4 other divers, her close friends and colleagues from the local diving club, boarded their boat just after sunrise. The group included Michael, the dive leader, Sarah, a marine biologist, and 2 others, David and Ian, who were both experienced in deep-sea exploration. They were excited to explore a new section of reef that had been recently discovered, a place teeming with colorful fish and intricate coral structures. By mid-morning, they were suited up and ready. The boat anchored about 2 miles from shore near the reef's edge. They checked their equipment carefully: oxygen tanks, regulators, masks. Rachel felt that familiar mix of anticipation and calm as she adjusted her gear. This was her element, the underwater world where everything else faded away. They descended into the clear, cool water, following the reef's slope to about 25 meters. The ocean was alive with movement. Schools of fish darted in and out of the coral, and sea turtles glided past. Rachel drifted a little farther from the group, mesmerized by a large sea fan swaying in the current. She had always liked exploring the quieter parts of the reef, away from the noise of bubbles and the chatter of her team through their underwater communication devices. But as she followed the reef's edge, she realized she had moved farther than she intended. When she glanced back, the group was a distant blur. She wasn't worried at first. She was experienced enough to know how to get back. She adjusted her buoyancy and began swimming back toward them. That's when she felt a shift in the water, a sudden stillness around her. Rachel froze, instinctively knowing something wasn't right. The water seemed heavier and the ocean was quieter. She turned slowly, scanning the deep blue. And that's when she saw it. A large, great white shark, easily over 16 feet long, glided toward her from the shadows. Its massive body moved with an eerie, effortless grace. The shark's black eyes locked onto her, and Rachel's heart pounded. She had seen sharks before, but this one felt different. It wasn't just passing by, it was interested in her. Rachel knew the rules. Stay calm, don't make sudden movements, keep eye contact. She tried to steady her breathing, aware of every exhale bubbling to the surface. She slowly ascended, hoping to get closer to her group or the boat, but the shark didn't back off. It circled her once, twice, each time getting closer. She could see the scars on its skin, the jagged edges of its powerful jaws. Then, without warning, the shark bumped her from behind, sending her spinning. The force of the hit knocked the regulator from her mouth, and she scrambled to retrieve it, her heart racing. She forced herself to stay calm, but panic clawed at the edges of her mind. As she fumbled to get her breathing back under control, the shark came around again, this time more aggressively. Rachel tried to stay vertical in the water, presenting herself as large as possible. But the shark was relentless. It darted forward, its jaws opening wide. Before Rachel could react, the shark lunged and clamped its teeth around her right leg. The pain was instant and overwhelming, shooting through her body like fire. She screamed, but the water swallowed the sound. She pounded on the shark's snout with her fists, trying to make it release her, but the creature's grip tightened, its teeth tearing deeper into her flesh. The water around her turned red, a cloud of blood billowing out from her leg. She could feel the muscles ripping, the bones grinding under the pressure of the shark's bite. The shark shook her violently, thrashing its head back and forth, trying to pull her deeper into the ocean. Rachel fought with everything she had, kicking her free leg, punching, clawing at the shark's rough skin. Meanwhile, behind the reef, Michael and the others noticed the commotion. Through the haze of bubbles and distance, they saw the dark shape circling Rachel, and the sudden burst of red in the water. Realizing what was happening, they swam as fast as they could toward her, their hearts pounding with fear. Rachel's strength was fading fast. The pain and blood loss were making her dizzy. She felt the shark pull harder, dragging her into darker depths. Just as she thought she couldn't fight anymore, she saw movement. Her team was coming. Michael reached her first. Without hesitation, he jabbed his dive knife into the shark's gills, a sensitive spot for the predator. The shark jerked back, momentarily releasing its grip on Rachel's leg. Sarah and David grabbed Rachel by her arms, pulling her up toward the surface while Michael continued to fend off the shark. But the shark wasn't done. It circled back, angrier now, and came in for another attack. Michael positioned himself between Rachel and the shark, slashing at it with his knife. The shark snapped at him but didn't connect. The distraction gave the others enough time to drag Rachel higher toward the boat. The ascent felt like an eternity. Rachel was barely conscious, her body limp in their arms. The pain was unbearable, but the fear of the shark returning kept her clinging to the edges of consciousness. The surface seemed impossibly far, but they pushed themselves harder, their lungs burning, their muscles screaming. When they finally broke the surface, Ian waved frantically at the boat. The crew on board pulled Rachel out of the water first, her blood pooling on the deck. Her leg was mangled, torn open from thigh to calf, the bone visible through the shredded muscle. She was pale, her breathing shallow, but she was alive. The others scrambled onto the boat, their eyes wide with shock and fear. They knew they had only minutes to stop the bleeding. The crew applied pressure to Rachel's wounds, wrapping her leg in towels and doing everything they could to keep her conscious. Michael radioed for emergency services, his voice shaking as he described the attack. Rachel drifted in and out of awareness, the pain ebbing and flowing like the tide. She could hear the frantic voices around her and feel the pressure on her leg. But everything felt distant, like she was floating above it all. She thought about the shark, the cold black eyes, the power of its bite. She had faced death and somehow survived. The boat sped back to shore where paramedics were waiting. They rushed Rachel to the nearest hospital where doctors worked for hours to save her leg. The damage was severe, but they managed to stabilize her. She would carry the scars for the rest of her life, a permanent reminder of the encounter that nearly ended it. For Rachel, the ocean would never feel the same again. She had always loved the sea, but now it held a different meaning. She had seen nature's raw, unpredictable power firsthand, and though she survived, the fear would never fully leave her. On October 4, 2024, 25-year-old professional surfer Jake Collins competed in a highly anticipated surf competition off the coast of Huntington Beach, California. Jake was a seasoned surfer known for his impressive skills on the waves. He had been surfing for most of his life, having grown up on the beaches of Southern California. His passion for the sport led him to compete in various competitions nationwide, earning him respect from his fellow surfers. With its vast stretch of coastline and perfect waves, Huntington Beach was a place Jake loved. He felt most alive here, riding the waves that had become his world. The competition was in full swing that day, with many talented surfers showing off their best tricks. The excitement was high as surfers paddled out to catch waves, and the atmosphere was charged with adrenaline. But something unpredictable was about to happen. As Jake paddled out to see his next wave, the water around him began to feel different. There was a shift in the usual rhythm of the ocean, and an eerie stillness surrounded him. Jake, focused on the waves ahead, didn't notice the massive shadow moving beneath him. The massive white shark surged upward from the ocean's depths without warning. The powerful predator, likely attracted by the commotion caused by the competition, struck quickly and fiercely. It instantly clamped down on Jake's leg as he prepared to ride the wave. The sheer force of the shark's bite caused a searing pain that overwhelmed him. The shark's massive jaws locked onto his leg, and with terrifying speed it began to drag Jake underwater. The other surfers, realizing what had just happened, rushed to help. They paddled towards Jake as fast as they could, shouting for assistance. But the shark was relentless. It thrashed violently, pulling Jake beneath the surface and refusing to let go. The surfers could only watch in horror as the attack unfolded in front of them. Once a place of thrill and joy, the ocean had turned into chaos. Despite their desperate attempts to save him, Jake was already unconscious from the shock and pain. The shark's attack had been so fast and brutal that there was little anyone could do. After what seemed like an eternity, the surfers managed to pull Jake back to the surface. His body was limp, and it was clear he had been severely injured. Blood stained the water around him as they struggled to get him back to the safety of the shore. The boat crew quickly reached the group of surfers, and they worked together to get Jake out of the water. But it was already too late. The damage from the shark's attack had been severe, and Jake was losing too much blood. As they rushed to get him to shore, Jake's condition worsened. Despite the efforts of the medical team, Jake died from blood loss before they could reach the shore. The attack on Jake Collins left the surfing community in shock and mourning. It was a tragic event that shook everyone who had known Jake and admired his talent. Huntington Beach, a place known for its perfect waves, would forever be marked by this unimaginable tragedy. Jake's death was not just the loss of a surfer, but of a young man with a bright future ahead of him, whose passion for the ocean had brought him so much joy. The death of Jake Collins sent shockwaves through the surfing community, leaving many in disbelief. He was a well-known and respected surfer, and a young man full of promise, admired by his peers for his talent and love of the sport. His sudden and tragic death brought attention to the dangers lurking beneath the waves. No matter how familiar or skilled a surfer may be, Huntington Beach, where the competition occurred, has always been popular with surfers worldwide. It is known for its excellent waves, sunny weather, and vibrant surf culture. However, that day's tragedy changed how many people viewed the sport and the ocean. The community, once filled with the excitement of competition, was now mourning the loss of one of its own. Jake's family and friends were devastated by the news. They had seen him grow up with a passion for surfing, and it had shaped his life in ways that few people could understand. He had spent countless hours in the ocean, perfecting his craft and dreaming of a future as a professional surfer. His death was not just a loss for those who knew him personally, but for the entire surfing world, which had lost a bright star. In the days following the attack, surfers worldwide paid tribute to Jake in various ways. Memorials were held in his honor, and surfers wore black ribbons to remember him. Some held moments of silence before competitions to reflect on the tragedy. It was a time of mourning and celebration of Jake's life and contributions to the sport he loved. The shark attack on Jake sparked conversations about shark conservation and safety in the ocean. While shark attacks are rare, they can have devastating effects when they do occur. The shark that attacked Jake was identified as a great white, a species known for its size and power. These sharks are often misunderstood, and many people fear them due to their reputation. However, experts in marine biology emphasize that sharks are an important part of the ocean ecosystem and that attacks on humans are incredibly rare. The competition organizers and local authorities increase safety measures for future events after the attack. They work closely with marine biologists to better understand the behavior of sharks in the area and how to prevent future attacks. Surfers were also encouraged to be more aware of their surroundings and to take precautions when competing in the ocean. Jake's family honored his memory by building a foundation to support young surfers and raise awareness about ocean safety. The foundation's mission was to help aspiring surfers follow in Jake's footsteps while ensuring they were educated on the importance of safety and respect for the ocean. Jake's legacy would live on through the foundation, allowing his love for surfing to inspire future surfers. The loss of Jake Collins was a tragedy that left a lasting impact on the surfing world. It reminded everyone that despite the beauty and thrill of the ocean, it is also a powerful force that must be respected. Jake's life and death brought people together, and his memory will continue to inspire those who love the sport and the sea. Clear morning in July 2020, the United States Coast Guard patrol team set out from the harbor at Cape Cod, the Atlantic shimmering under a cloudless sky. Their mission was routine, a search and rescue sweep along the coastline, prompted by reports of a missing recreational boater. The patrol boat, a sleek 47-foot vessel painted in crisp white and orange, sliced through the gentle swells as seagulls wheeled overhead. Lieutenant Sarah Johnson, 31 years old and one of the most experienced officers aboard, stood near the starboard side. Her short brown hair was damp from the salty mist that clung to the morning air. She had spent years navigating these waters, braving fierce storms and dangerous rescues. This morning felt deceptively calm, the sea's surface smooth and inviting. As the boat slowed near a narrow channel flanked by rocky outcrops, the crew prepared to deploy depth markers and search equipment. Sarah, ever meticulous, leaned over the side to get a better view of the water's clarity and assess the boat's positioning. Beneath the surface, dark patches flickered, likely schools of fish moving in synchronized patterns. The Atlantic was teeming with life that time of year. Lobster traps dotted the coastline, and pods of dolphins often broke through the waves, delighting tourists on whale-watching tours. But it wasn't only the playful marine creatures that called these waters home. Cape Cod had long been a hotspot for great white sharks, their presence increasing in recent years as seal populations surged. Sarah was aware of the danger. Her training had drilled into her the risks of shark encounters, but they were typically distant threats, mere shadows passing beneath the boat. Today, she barely gave it a thought. The boat rocked gently as Sarah knelt, leaning farther over the edge to adjust a depth gauge. The water below gleamed with a deceptive calmness. Her fingers brushed the cold surface. That was when it happened. A sudden surge of water erupted just feet from the boat. The sleek torpedo-shaped body of a great white shark, estimated at over 16 feet long, breached from the depths with terrifying speed. Its gray and white body gleamed in the sunlight, and its jaws, lined with serrated teeth, opened wide. The shark's eyes were black and soulless, fixed on its target. The boat shuddered violently as the shark struck its side with bone-jarring force. Crew members stumbled, grabbing onto railings to avoid being thrown into the water. Equipment clattered across the deck, and the engine sputtered as the vessel tilted precariously. Sarah lost her grip. Time seemed to slow as she plunged into the icy water. Her body was immediately enveloped by the cold, the shock momentarily paralyzing her. She kicked frantically, desperate to surface, but the shark was already upon her. It moved with terrifying precision, a predator built for speed and power. The initial strike was catastrophic. The shark's jaws clamped down on Sarah's right thigh, slicing through muscle and bone with brutal efficiency. Pain exploded through her body, sharp and all-consuming. Her scream was swallowed by the churning water. The crew on the boat sprang into action, throwing ropes and deploying rescue equipment. Sarah thrashed wildly, fighting against the shark's pull as it attempted to drag her deeper. Blood billowed into the water, a crimson cloud that seemed to ignite the shark's frenzy. Desperation surged through her veins. Her instincts, honed by years of survival training, kicked in. She clawed at the shark's rough skin, her fingers slipping against its sandpaper-like texture. The beast thrashed, its powerful tail propelling them in chaotic spirals. Sarah's lungs burnt as she struggled to stay conscious. The world around her blurred into a chaotic swirl of red and blue. She knew she was seconds away from drowning or being torn apart. On the boat, her crewmates fought with equal desperation. One officer managed to loop a rope around Sarah's arm, shouting commands as they heaved with all their strength. The shark, sensing resistance, released its grip momentarily. Blood streamed from Sarah's mangled leg as she was yanked toward the surface. The moment of reprieve was short-lived. The shark circled back, its instincts fully activated by the scent of blood. It lunged again, its jaws snapping inches from Sarah's torso. Her vision dimmed as the pain threatened to pull her into oblivion. With a final, desperate effort, the crew hauled Sarah aboard. Her body hit the deck with a sickening thud, water pouring from her lungs as she gasped for air. Blood pooled beneath her, staining the white surface of the boat. The shark, relentless and enraged, rammed the side of the vessel once more. The boat rocked violently, but the crew managed to stabilize it. They gunned the engine, the propellers churning the water into a frothy spray as they sped away from the attack site. Sarah's breath came in ragged gasps, her skin pale and slick with seawater. The crew worked frantically to staunch the bleeding, wrapping tourniquets around her shredded leg. Her eyes fluttered open, the pain etched into every line of her face. The boat raced toward the shore, the coastline a distant blur on the horizon. Every second felt agonizingly long, the weight of what had just happened pressing down on everyone aboard. Sarah was rushed to the nearest hospital where a team of surgeons fought to save her life. Her injuries were catastrophic, but she survived. The attack left her with permanent scars, both physical and psychological. Her leg, irreparably damaged, required extensive reconstruction. The incident made national headlines, and it became a reminder of the unpredictable dangers lurking beneath the surface of the ocean. Experts speculated that the shark's aggression was likely triggered by territorial instincts or dwindling food sources in the region. Sarah's survival was hailed as a miracle, but for her, the memory of the attack was a nightmare she would carry forever. The Atlantic, once a familiar and trusted ally, had revealed its darkest face. And though she eventually returned to duty, the scars on her body and soul remained a testament to the thin line between human mastery and nature's raw, untamed fury. The waters off the coast of the Bahamas were a mesmerizing blue, stretching endlessly beneath a cloudless sky. Emily and Mark, a young couple from Toronto, stood on the deck of their private charter boat. It was July 2024, so the warm ocean breeze tossed their hair as the boat sailed. It was the kind of moment they'd dreamed of. A quiet escape from the constant buzz of the city, a chance to reconnect, just the two of them under the vast open sky. By the time the 12th of July had rolled around, their vacation had already been everything they'd hoped for. The day had unfolded perfectly. Hours spent exploring hidden coves, snorkeling among vibrant coral reefs alive with tropical fish, and soaking up the sun in peaceful seclusion. The boat's crew, a seasoned captain and 2 deckhands, had anchored several miles from shore in a remote spot where the water was crystal clear, almost inviting. As the sun began to sink lower in the sky, painting the horizon in soft shades of gold and pink, Emily and Mark exchanged a glance. The serene beauty of the moment was too good to pass up. Mark asked for just one more swim before they retired back to their hotel. Without hesitation, Emily nodded. Together they approached the warm, calm water. Emily, graceful and confident in the water, dove in first, her laughter echoing across the stillness. Mark followed, splashing beside her with playful energy. They swam side by side, the boat bobbing gently in the distance. The water was cool against their sun-warmed skin, and for a moment everything felt timeless and infinite. Beneath them, the ocean was a world of its own, vast, mysterious, and indifferent. Schools of fish darted through the water, their silver scales catching the fading light. Far below, shadows moved across the seabed, hidden from the eyes of those above. The couple, lost in their moment of joy, remained blissfully unaware of the danger lurking in the depths. The first sign of trouble was subtle, a sudden shift in the water's rhythm. Unseen currents swirled beneath the surface, carrying with them a faint metallic scent. At the heart of this current was a massive bull shark. The 14-foot predator with a torpedo-shaped body and cold, calculating eyes had been drawn by the vibrations of their movements. Its senses, honed by millions of years of evolution, detected the splash of limbs and the erratic pulse of heartbeats. It circled below, its powerful tail propelling it with predatory grace. Mark was the first to feel it, but by that time he couldn't prevent the danger from happening. It was a sudden, violent impact that knocked the breath from his lungs. The shark's jaws clamped down on his leg with bone-crushing force, serrated teeth tearing through flesh and muscle. Pain shot through his body, white-hot and searing. Blood billowed into the water, turning it a murky red. He thrashed instinctively, his movements frantic and disoriented. Emily, just a few feet away, froze in horror as the water around Mark exploded in a chaotic swirl of foam and blood. Her heart raced, a primal fear taking hold. Mark's eyes were wide with shock as he struggled against the shark's grip, but the predator was relentless. It shook its massive head, dragging him beneath the surface. Desperation ignited Emily's instincts. She lunged toward Mark, her hands reaching for him even as the water churned violently. Her fingers brushed his arm, but the shark yanked him deeper, out of her grasp. Emily kicked furiously, her lungs burning as she dove after them. The salt stung her eyes, but she refused to look away. The shark released Mark briefly, its predatory instincts drawing it toward the new threat, Emily. Her thrashing movements made her an irresistible target. The shark turned with terrifying precision, its eyes devoid of emotion. Emily saw it coming, a dark shadow slicing through the water. She tried to swim backward, but it was too late. The shark's jaws closed around her torso, driving the air from her lungs in a single, brutal instant. The pain was blinding, radiating through her body as the shark's teeth sank deep. Blood clouded her vision and her strength ebbed with each passing second. The predator thrashed violently, dragging her in a deadly spiral beneath the waves. Her mind, fogged with pain and panic, registered fleeting images, the glint of sunlight refracting through the water. Mark's limp form sinking into the depths, and the cold, merciless eyes of the shark. On the boat, the crew had seen the attack unfold with mounting horror. The captain shouted commands and the deckhands scrambled to lower a rescue line. The engine roared to life as they maneuvered the boat toward the blood-streaked water. One of the deckhands, a man with years of experience at sea, grabbed a harpoon and aimed it at the dark shape circling below. The boat drew closer, but the water was a chaotic mess of thrashing limbs and crimson clouds. The shark, agitated by the presence of the boat, released Emily and disappeared into the depths for a brief moment. Her body floated motionless, blood pooling around her. One of the crew members dove into the water, risking his life to pull her back to the boat. He grabbed her under the arms and kicked hard, propelling them toward safety. As they hauled Emily's lifeless body onto the deck, it became clear that the damage was catastrophic. Her torso was shredded, her skin pale from blood loss. Mark's body was nowhere to be seen at first, as it had been swallowed by the vastness of the ocean. The boat crew worked frantically to resuscitate Emily, but it was futile. Her injuries were beyond saving. As they worked, the search for Mark's body continued by others for several hours until his remains were discovered beneath a rock. In that instant, the crew knew he couldn't have survived. Whether from the shark attack or the extended time spent underwater without a diving gear. The captain radioed for help, his voice steady despite the grim reality. The boat, once filled with laughter and anticipation, was now a scene of tragedy. By the time the authorities arrived, the sun had dipped below the horizon, casting the ocean in darkness. What they could do was only to identify the bodies and then call the attention of the families. News of the attack spread quickly, a sobering reminder of the unpredictable dangers that lurk in the wild. The romantic getaway, meant to be a celebration of love and adventure, had turned into a nightmare of blood and loss. The morning started like any other along the California coast. It was late summer 2018, and the beach near Montana de Oro State Park was quiet, and locals preferred overcrowded tourist spots. Michael Harris had brought his 12-year-old son, Ethan, for a day of relaxation. Michael was a single father, and these beach trips had become their tradition, a way to escape school and work routine. They arrived around 9 a.m. with the sun just beginning to warm the sand. Michael set up their spot with towels, a cooler, and a beach umbrella. Always full of energy, Ethan wasted no time kicking off his sandals and running toward the waves with his boogie board. The ocean was calm, the waves gentle enough for a kid to feel safe but strong enough to ride. Michael watched his son from the shore, occasionally glancing at his phone but mostly keeping his eyes on Ethan. The boy had always loved the ocean, fearless in a way only kids could be. He paddled out farther than usual, but Michael wasn't worried. They'd done this countless times and Ethan was a good swimmer. By midday, the beach had filled with a few more families, but it was still peaceful. The salty air and the sound of crashing waves created a calm sense. Michael sipped from a bottle of water, watching Ethan ride wave after wave, his laughter carrying over the surf. But then something changed. Michael noticed Ethan had drifted farther out than before. The boy paddled harder, trying to catch a wave, but the water pulled him back. Michael stood up, shading his eyes with his hand. Ethan didn't seem panicked, but he was farther than Michael liked. Then it happened. Without warning, the water around Ethan exploded. A massive, dark shape surged from below, and Michael saw the unmistakable flash of white teeth. Ethan's boogie board flipped into the air as the great white shark lunged at him. The boy's scream pierced the quiet beach, snapping everyone's attention to the water. Michael's heart stopped. Ethan's voice rang out again, clearer this time and filled with terror, desperately pleading for his father's help. Michael sprinted toward the water, his feet sinking into the wet sand. The cold waves crashed against his legs as he waded deeper. But the distance between him and Ethan felt impossible to close. The shark circled, its dorsal fin slicing through the water like a blade. Ethan thrashed, trying to break free, but the shark was relentless. Michael swam as fast as he could, his muscles burning, but he was still too far. He saw the shark clamp down on Ethan's leg, pulling him under. The water turned red, spreading like ink in the surf. Ethan resurfaced briefly, his face twisted in pain and fear before the shark dragged him down again. Michael shouted for help, his voice raw and desperate. Other beachgoers rushed toward the water, but no one dared go in as far as Michael had. A man ran to call 911, but Michael knew it wouldn't matter. Time was slipping away. Ethan's head broke the surface one last time. His eyes met his father's, wide and pleading. Michael reached out, but the distance between them felt like miles. The shark surged again and Ethan disappeared beneath the waves. Michael dove underwater, searching for any sign of his son, but all he saw was a cloud of blood. He resurfaced, gasping for air, his chest tight with panic. He dove again, his arms flailing in the dark water, but there was nothing. No movement, no Ethan. Minutes felt like hours. When Michael finally stumbled back to shore, exhausted and shaking, the paramedics had arrived. They tried to comfort him, but he couldn't hear their words. His mind was stuck on Ethan's scream, on the last look in his son's eyes. The search continued for hours, with lifeguards, boats, and helicopters combing the water. But as the sun began to set, it became clear there was no hope. They never found Ethan's body. Only the shredded remains of his boogie board washed ashore later that evening. The beach that once felt like a haven became a place of unbearable loss. Long after everyone else had left, Michael stood at the edge of the water, staring at the horizon, replaying the moment repeatedly in his mind. He could still hear Ethan's voice, his final plea echoing. In the following days, the news spread quickly, shocking the local community. Although great white sharks were known to roam the California coast, such attacks were rare. Experts said the shark was likely drawn closer to shore by schools of fish or seals, but no explanation could ease Michael's pain. The town held a memorial service for Ethan a week later. Friends, family, and strangers gathered on the same beach, lighting candles and laying flowers in the sand. Michael stood apart from the crowd, his eyes fixed on the water. He couldn't shake the guilt. He felt responsible no matter how many people told him it wasn't his fault. He had been there. He had seen it happen. And he couldn't save his son. January 12, 2025. Was a bright and clear morning along the coast of San Diego, California. The waves were rolling in perfectly, making it an ideal day for surfing. Among the surfers enjoying the ocean that day was 27-year-old Daniel Watts, a passionate surfer who had spent most of his life riding waves. He had grown up in California and had been drawn to the ocean since childhood. Over the years, he had become skilled in the sport, often traveling to different beaches in search of the best waves. San Diego was one of his favorite spots. He had spent countless hours in these waters. Daniel was known for his adventurous nature and love for the sea. He had been surfing for more than a decade and had a deep understanding of the ocean. He respected its power and was always cautious while in the water. That morning he arrived at the beach feeling excited. He had checked the weather and wave conditions, ensuring it was a good day to surf. He put on his wetsuit, grabbed his board, and headed into the water. The waves were perfect, and he felt the familiar rush of excitement as he paddled out. Daniel caught wave after wave for over an hour, feeling completely at ease in the water. The sun reflected off the ocean's surface, and everything seemed peaceful. He had no idea that danger was lurking beneath him. As he paddled back out after a strong ride, something massive moved silently below him. A 16-foot great white shark had been lurking in the deeper waters, unnoticed by the surfers nearby. The movement of the surfers above had caught its attention, and it began to close in. Without warning, the shark attacked. It launched itself upward with incredible force, striking Daniel from below. The impact was immediate and brutal. The shark latched onto Daniel's torso, its teeth slicing through his wetsuit and into his flesh. The predator's grip was cruel as it shook its head violently, attempting to tear him apart. The pain was overwhelming, but Daniel's survival instincts kicked in. He struggled against the shark's hold, fighting with all his strength. Water splashed wildly around him as he thrashed, desperate to break free. Daniel was dragged under but miraculously fought free despite being severely injured. His entire back was stripped of skin, leaving deep lacerations. Blood filled the water around him, attracting even more danger. The powerful predator circled for another attack, but other surfers nearby had already started shouting and paddling toward him. The noise and sudden movement distracted the shark for a brief moment, giving Daniel just enough time to stay afloat. A group of surfers rushed to his aid, pulling him onto a board as quickly as possible. They could see the severity of his injuries, but they focused on getting him to shore. The beach was still some distance away, and every second mattered. Despite the unbearable pain, Daniel clung to consciousness as his rescuers paddled furiously, knowing that reaching land was his only chance for survival. The fight for his life was far from over. The surfers paddled with strength, trying to get Daniel to shore as quickly as possible. The water around them was still stained red, a chilling reminder of the attack. Every second felt longer than the last as they struggled against the waves. Daniel's body was weak and his breathing was shallow. He was losing a lot of blood and his injuries were severe. His rescuers knew they had to move fast before it was too late. As they reached the shore, a group of beachgoers rushed to help. Someone had already called emergency services, and sirens could be heard in the distance. Lifeguards arrived first, bringing medical supplies and working quickly to stop the bleeding. Daniel's entire back had been stripped of skin, leaving deep wounds that were difficult to treat on the spot. The lifeguards did their best to keep him stable, applying pressure to slow the blood loss. They asked him to stay awake, but his body was weak. Minutes later, paramedics arrived and carefully placed him on a stretcher. They knew his condition was critical and transported him to the nearest hospital without delay. Inside the ambulance, his pulse was checked repeatedly. The ride felt long, and there was no certainty about whether he would survive. His body had suffered immense trauma, and the amount of blood he had lost was dangerous. Doctors were prepared to begin emergency treatment as soon as he arrived. At the hospital, a team of specialists worked quickly. His wounds needed immediate attention, and surgeons operated for hours to try to repair the damage. The deep cuts and torn flesh made the procedure difficult. The medical team fought to control the bleeding, prevent infection, and stabilize him. His body had been through a lot, and his condition remained uncertain. News of the attack spread quickly. Surfers who had been in the water that day shared their terrifying experience. Locals were shocked as shark attacks in the area were rare. Beach officials immediately closed the seas to ensure no one else was at risk. Warnings were issued advising people to stay away until further notice. The incident raised concerns about increased shark activity along the coast. Daniel's family and friends waited anxiously for updates. The hospital remained silent about his chances of survival, as the extent of his injuries made it impossible to predict what would happen. Experts analyzed the attack to understand why the shark had targeted him. Some believed the predator had mistaken him for prey, while others thought the presence of surfers had disturbed its hunting patterns. Days passed and Daniel remained in critical condition. Doctors monitored him closely, watching for signs of improvement. The attack had left him permanently scarred, both physically and emotionally. His future as a surfer was uncertain, but what mattered most was whether he would survive. The ocean, once his greatest passion, had turned into a place of danger. His fight was not over. Only time would tell if he would. On July 18, 2023, Emily Grant, a 26-year-old tourist from California, was on a long-awaited vacation with her family in Maui, Hawaii. The sun shone brightly over the crystal-clear waters as the family set out on a snorkeling trip near a well-known coral reef. Emily, an adventurous spirit, had always been fascinated by marine life. She had spent weeks researching the best spots to explore underwater and was thrilled to experience the beauty of the Hawaiian Ocean finally. The group included Emily's parents, her younger brother, and a few cousins. They looked forward to this day, eager to witness the colorful fish and coral formations beneath the waves. Their boat anchored near a quiet spot, and the group eagerly slipped into the water. They floated over the reef as small fish darted around them. The gentle waves made the experience peaceful, and for a while, everything felt perfect. Drawn by the beauty of the underwater world, Emily slowly drifted away from the others. She was mesmerized by the sea turtles gliding past and the schools of fish weaving through the coral. The sunlight reflected off the water, creating a dazzling effect. She felt a sense of calm, unaware that danger lurked beneath. As she moved farther, the ocean floor darkened slightly, signaling deeper waters. The rest of her family remained close to the boat, chatting and admiring the scenery. They occasionally called out to Emily to make sure she was still nearby. She responded each time, waving before diving back under to continue her exploration. Without warning, a large shadow emerged from the depths. A 12-foot tiger shark, a powerful predator, had been circling unnoticed. The snorkeler's movement and splashing had likely drawn its attention. Its sleek body moved precisely, and its eyes locked on Emily as she floated just above. The moment was sudden and brutal. The shark lunged forward, grabbing Emily by the torso with its massive jaws. The force of the attack sent ripples through the water as the predator dragged her down. Her body twisted in the struggle, bubbles rising to the surface as she attempted to break free. The water, once calm and clear, turned chaotic. Her family realized something was wrong and turned toward the disturbance. Panic set in as they saw a dark shape thrashing in the distance. They screamed for help, their voices filled with terror. The boat crew rushed to react, but they could do little. The vast and unpredictable ocean had already taken control. The shark held its grip, pulling Emily deeper away from any chance of rescue. She disappeared beneath the waves within moments, leaving nothing but disturbed water behind. The silence that followed was overwhelming. Frozen was in shock, and the family could not process what had happened. The boat crew alerted authorities, and a frantic search began. Divers scoured the area, but the ocean had already claimed its victim. The beauty of the Hawaiian waters had turned into a scene of horror, leaving those who witnessed the attack forever changed. After the violent struggle, the water settled, leaving only ripples where Emily had vanished. Her family remained frozen, unable to comprehend what had just happened. The once peaceful ocean now felt vast and empty. The boat crew immediately contacted emergency responders, urging them to send help. A sense of urgency filled the air, but everyone feared the worst deep inside. Minutes felt like hours as authorities arrived to begin the search. Helicopters hovered above the water, scanning for any sign of Emily. Boats spread across the area, and divers moved through the depths, hoping for a miracle. Despite their best efforts, there was no trace of her. The powerful and unpredictable ocean had taken her beyond reach. News of the attack spread quickly. Local officials warned other snorkelers and swimmers to stay out of the water. Marine experts were called in to analyze the situation, but there was no clear explanation for why the shark had attacked. Some believed it had mistaken Emily for prey, while others pointed out that tiger sharks are naturally aggressive hunters. The mystery only deepened the fear that now surrounded the waters of Maui. Back on shore, Emily's family struggled to process their loss. Just hours earlier, they had been laughing and enjoying their time together. Now everything felt unreal. The joy of their vacation had turned into heartbreak. They were surrounded by people offering support, but no words could ease their pain. The thought of leaving without Emily was unbearable. Authorities continued searching for days. Boats patrolled the area, and divers explored the depths, hoping to recover anything that might bring closure to the grieving family. Then, after a few days, their worst fears were confirmed. Emily's body was discovered, bearing the marks of the attack. The ocean had finally returned what it had taken, but the sight was devastating. The attack sent shockwaves through the local community. Tourists who had once eagerly entered the water now hesitated. Business owners who relied on snorkeling and diving tours faced cancellations. Fear spread quickly. and the once busy beaches grew quieter. Some locals defended the ocean, reminding others that sharks were a natural part of the ecosystem. Others, however, called for action, demanding safety measures to prevent another tragedy. Experts offered various solutions. Some suggested putting up more warning signs and increasing patrols in popular snorkeling areas. Others recommended studying shark behavior to understand what might trigger an attack. Despite these discussions, one truth remained unchanged. The ocean could never be completely controlled. Emily's family eventually returned home, carrying the heavy burden of their loss. Their vacation had become a nightmare they would never forget. They wanted to remember Emily for her adventurous spirit, but the way she was taken from them left a wound that would never fully heal. The waters of Maui, once a place of beauty and joy, would forever remind them of the day they lost her. The waters off the coast of Jupiter, Florida shimmered under the midday sun. The ocean stretched endlessly, a serene and inviting canvas of deep blues and greens. A group of thrill-seeking tourists, clad in wetsuits and buzzing with anticipation, gathered on the deck of the chartered dive boat. They were here for a once-in-a-lifetime experience, shark diving in one of the most renowned shark-infested areas of the Atlantic. The company operating the excursion had a sterling reputation. Safety was their top priority, they assured the group. Thick, reinforced steel cages hung off the sides of the boat, their bars gleaming under the sun. The guides, seasoned experts, briefed the participants on the proper procedures, how to enter the cages, what to avoid, and most importantly, how to remain calm in the presence of sharks. Dan Price, a 33-year-old adrenaline junkie with a muscular build and sun-bleached hair, stood apart from the group. His friends often called him fearless, though reckless might have been a better description. He lived for the rush. The higher the cliff, the deeper the dive, the wilder the adventure, the better. As the guide spoke, Dan's attention wavered. His gaze drifted toward the open water, where fins occasionally cut through the surface like knives. The cages seemed unnecessary, even confining. He didn't come all this way just to be locked behind bars. One by one, the tourists descended into the cages, cameras in hand, their faces both anxious and exhilarated. Inside the cages, they would have a front-row seat to nature's raw majesty. Predatory sharks gliding effortlessly through the water, eyes cold and calculating. Dan had no intention of staying inside a cage. Ignoring the guide's instructions, he strapped on a snorkel mask and slipped into the water away from the others. The sudden chill sent a shiver up his spine, but he relished the feeling. The ocean enveloped him, weightless and vast. Schools of shimmering fish darted past, and the muffled sounds of the world above faded into silence. He swam confidently, venturing farther from the boat. The cage divers watched in disbelief as Dan moved freely through the open water. Even the guides on the boat gestured frantically, but Dan paid them no mind. This was freedom. This was living. A shadow flickered in the distance, a sleek, muscular form cutting through the water with predatory grace. A 10-foot bull shark emerged from the blue haze, its torpedo-shaped body moving with unnerving ease. Its pale underbelly glowed faintly in the filtered sunlight, and its black eyes were void of emotion. Dan's bravado faltered. His breath quickened inside the snorkel as he registered the sheer size of the creature. But it was curiosity, not aggression, that brought the shark closer. Bull sharks were known for their unpredictable nature, but this one showed no immediate signs of hostility. Dan's instincts betrayed him. Panic flared in his chest, overriding the logical part of his brain that knew better than to thrash. His arms and legs flailed wildly as he tried to backpedal through the water. The sudden, erratic movements sent shockwaves through the ocean, signaling distress, a beacon for predators. The shark's demeanor changed in an instant. It veered sharply, drawn by the chaotic splashing. Its streamlined body tensed, muscles rippling as it closed the distance with alarming speed. Dan's flailing only intensified, creating a froth of bubbles around him. In a blur of motion, the shark struck. Its powerful jaws clamped down on Dan's right leg, teeth slicing through flesh and muscle with surgical precision. Pain exploded through his body, white-hot and blinding. Blood billowed into the water, staining it crimson. Dan's scream was swallowed by the ocean as the shark thrashed, dragging him downward. The pressure built in his ears and his lungs screamed for air. Instinct took over. He clawed at the water, his hands searching for anything to hold onto. His vision blurred, and the world was reduced to a chaotic swirl of red and blue. On the boat, the guides sprang into action. One of them dove in with a rescue line, cutting through the water with powerful strokes. Another grabbed a pole spear, ready to fend off the shark if necessary. Dan's strength waned. His leg was a mangled mess, and the loss of blood made his movements sluggish. The shark, perhaps sensing its advantage, released him momentarily but circled back for another strike. The guide reached Dan just in time. Wrapping an arm around his chest, he hauled him toward the surface. The shark lunged again, jaws snapping inches from Dan's foot. but the guide drove the pole spear into its snout. The predator recoiled, disoriented. Breaking through the surface, Dan gasped for air, his face contorted in agony. The crew hoisted him aboard, blood pooling on the deck as they laid him down. His leg was a gruesome sight, flesh shredded, bone exposed. The captain radioed for emergency medical assistance as the crew worked frantically to stabilize him. Dan faded in and out of consciousness, the adrenaline no longer enough to mask the searing pain. The world around him blurred, voices and faces merging into a chaotic symphony. The boat raced back to shore, where paramedics were waiting. Dan was rushed to the hospital. His condition was critical, but stable. Surgeons worked tirelessly to save his leg, but the damage was too extensive. Part of it had to be amputated. News of the attack spread quickly, making headlines across the country. The shark diving company faced intense scrutiny, though they maintained that all safety protocols had been followed. Dan's reckless decision to bypass the cage had put him in danger, a cautionary tale for thrill-seekers who underestimated the ocean's unpredictability. In the months that followed, Dan's life changed dramatically. The once fearless adventurer now faced a long road to recovery, both physically and mentally. His prosthetic leg served as a constant reminder of that fateful day. Though he survived, Dan's story became a somber lesson for others. The ocean is a realm where respect and caution are not just advised, they are essential. The thrill of freedom can quickly turn into a nightmare when nature's rules are ignored. And for Dan, that lesson came at a steep price, one he would carry with him for the rest of his life. The morning of March 14, 2019, began like any other on the island of Viti Levu in Fiji. The sun rose over the horizon, casting a soft light over the calm waters. A well-known photographer, Daniel Rhodes, had planned a special underwater photo shoot for that day. He had traveled from Australia to capture something unique and beautiful in Fiji's clear, warm waters. The subject of his shoot was Sophia Reid, a 29-year-old model from New Zealand, known for her grace and elegance in underwater photography. Sophia had always felt at home in the water. She had been swimming since childhood and had developed a reputation for staying calm and still beneath the surface, making her perfect for underwater shoots. Having worked with Daniel multiple times, she was excited about this session. They had picked a spot off the Coral Coast where the water was known for its clarity, and the reefs provided a colorful backdrop. The crew arrived early, setting up their equipment on a small boat anchored near the reef. The plan was to capture Sophia floating gracefully on the water's surface, surrounded by flowers. The team scattered the flowers around her, their bright colors contrasting against the deep blue below. Sophia slipped into the water, her white dress flowing around her as she positioned herself. Daniel adjusted his camera, directing Sophia from above, while his assistant, Mark, handled the lighting equipment from the boat. Everything seemed perfect. The light filtered through the water, casting soft shadows on Sophia's face. Her eyes were closed, her body relaxed, and the flowers drifted gently around her. Daniel captured shot after shot, moving around the boat to find the best angles. The crew was quiet, focused on the task, unaware of the danger lurking below. Unbeknownst to them, the disturbance in the water had attracted something far more dangerous than they could have imagined. A great white shark, measuring over 15 feet long, lurked in the deeper waters beyond the reef. Drawn by the movement and the unfamiliar scents, it began to approach the area, its powerful body easily cutting through the water. At first, the shark moved slowly, circling the boat from a distance. The crew remained unaware, their attention fixed on Sophia and the camera. But as the minutes passed, the shark grew bolder, closing the distance between itself and the floating model. It moved with purpose, its dark silhouette barely visible beneath the surface. Still floating peacefully, Sophia felt a sudden shift in the water around her. A strange current brushed against her legs, but she stayed in position, thinking it was just the natural movement of the sea. Daniel noticed nothing unusual. His camera clicked steadily as he captured what he thought were the best shots of his career. But then, everything changed. The shark surged upward with terrifying speed, its jaws wide open. In an instant, it clamped down on Sophia's midsection, the force of the bite pulling her beneath the surface. The water exploded in a spray of red, and the serene scene turned into chaos. Daniel froze, his camera slipping from his hands into the water. The crew on the boat screamed, their voices blending with Sophia's muffled cries as she disappeared beneath the waves. Mark lunged toward the ship's edge, shouting Sophia's name, but he could do nothing. The shark had dragged her down too fast, too far. Beneath the surface, Sophia struggled against the shark's powerful grip. The pain was immediate and blinding, radiating from her abdomen where the shark's teeth had torn through flesh and bone. She kicked and flailed, her arms thrashing in the water, trying to break free, but the shark was relentless. It shook her violently, its teeth tearing deeper into her body with each movement. Sophia's vision blurred as the blood loss took its toll. The water around her was thick with red, clouding her sight and choking her lungs as she struggled to breathe. She felt the shark release her briefly, only to bite down again, this time on her leg. The sharp pain shot through her body, but her strength was fading. She tried to scream, but the water filled her mouth, silencing her cries. On the boat, Daniel and the crew were frantic. They threw life rings and ropes into the water, hoping Sophia could somehow reach them. Mark grabbed a long pole, trying to fend off the shark if it surfaced again. But the water was still now, except for the growing red stain that spread outward from where Sophia had vanished. Suddenly, Sophia's body floated to the surface. She was motionless, her white dress now soaked with blood, her limbs limp in the water. Daniel and Mark pulled her onto the boat, their hands trembling as they saw the extent of her injuries. Her midsection was torn open, deep gashes running across her torso and down her leg. Blood poured from the wounds, pooling on the deck of the boat. Mark pressed his hands against the largest wound, trying to stop the bleeding. Daniel grabbed the radio, frantically calling for help, his voice shaking with fear. But deep down, they both knew it was too late. Sophia's eyes fluttered open briefly, her gaze unfocused, her lips moving silently. Then her body went still. The crew sat in stunned silence, the only sound being the waves lapping against the boat. The day's beauty had turned into a nightmare, and the serene photo shoot was now a horror scene. Hours later, the Coast Guard arrived, responding to Daniel's distress call. They took Sophia's body back to the shore, but there was nothing more that could be done. The authorities launched an investigation, confirming that a great white shark was responsible for the attack. It was one of the largest ever recorded in the area, and its aggressive behavior shocked even the most experienced marine biologists. The news of Sophia's death spread quickly. Her family and friends were devastated, struggling to comprehend how a simple photo shoot had ended in such a horrific tragedy. The photos taken that day were never released, locked away as a grim reminder of what had happened. July 15, 2020, the Harris family packed their car for a long-awaited picnic at a secluded beach on the Outer Banks of North Carolina. The sky was a canvas of endless blue, the ocean stretching beyond it with a shimmer that beckoned under the warmth of the summer sun. It was the kind of perfect day the family had dreamed of after months of juggling work schedules and school obligations. Brian and Emma Harris, both in their late 30s, had decided it was time to unwind with their two children, 10-year-old Luke and his younger sister Claire, who was 7. Their chosen spot was a quiet stretch of sand away from the more crowded tourist areas. Towering dunes fringed the beach, offering privacy, while the rhythmic crash of waves created a serene backdrop. The children wasted no time. Luke dashed toward the water with Claire trailing behind him, their laughter mingling with the sound of the waves. Emma spread out a blanket on the sand while Brian unloaded the cooler filled with sandwiches, drinks, and snacks. The salty breeze tugged at their hair, and for a moment everything felt blissfully simple. Luke, brimming with energy, ventured farther into the water. He was a strong swimmer for his age, fearless when it came to the ocean. The waves lapped around him as he floated on his back, eyes squinting against the bright sun. Claire stayed closer to the shore, splashing in the shallows and collecting seashells. Emma glanced up from the blanket, her gaze instinctively tracking her son. He was a dark speck bobbing in the blue expanse, but he seemed fine. She smiled, reassured by his confidence. Brian sat beside her, cracking open a soda and sighing contentedly. The scene was idyllic, sunlit, peaceful, and full of joy. But beneath the surface of the water, danger lurked. The great white shark, over 12 feet long, had been patrolling the coastline for hours. Its sleek body moved with lethal grace, muscles rippling as it cut through the depths. Driven by hunger, it followed the scent trails of baitfish and seals that often lingered near the warmer shallows. The splashing sounds from the beach caught its attention, a disturbance that mimicked the frantic movements of wounded prey. The shark veered toward the source, its instincts sharpening. Luke, still floating on his back, was oblivious to the shadow approaching from below. A sudden wave jolted him upright, and he began paddling back toward the shore. He kicked hard, splashing noisily. The disturbance triggered the shark's predatory reflex. With a powerful thrust of its tail, it surged upward, jaws wide. The attack was swift and brutal. Luke's scream was cut short as he was yanked underwater. The force of the bite sent shockwaves through his small body, and the water around him churned crimson. His legs flailed, instinctively trying to kick free, but the shark's grip was unrelenting. On the shore, Emma's head snapped toward the water. Her breath caught in her throat as she saw the thrashing and the spreading red stain. Time is fractured into fragments. Her body moved before her mind could catch up, her feet pounding across the sand as she sprinted toward the ocean. The waves slammed against her, but she pushed forward, adrenaline overriding fear. Luke surfaced briefly, gasping for air, his face contorted in pain. Emma's heart seized at the sight of her son's terror. The shark was dragging him farther out, its tail slicing through the water like a scythe. Emma reached Luke, her hands grasping desperately for him. The shark released its grip momentarily, its cold eyes flickering with renewed focus. In that instant, Emma wrapped her arms around her son, pulling him toward her. The shark struck again. Its teeth raked across Emma's thigh, slicing deep into flesh. White-hot pain radiated through her leg. She screamed, but she refused to let go of Luke. Blood mingled with saltwater, clouding her vision. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she kicked frantically, trying to put distance between them and the predator. Brian had seen the horror unfold from the beach. Without hesitation, he charged into the water, fighting the waves with every ounce of strength. His powerful strokes closed the gap between him and his family. The shark circled back, its dorsal fin cutting the surface ominously. Brian reached them just as the shark lunged again. He heaved Luke onto his back and gripped Emma's arm, dragging her toward the shore. The water seemed endless, every step a battle against the ocean's pull. Emma's injured leg throbbed, but she clenched her teeth, focusing on the safety of her children. The shark followed, its hunger undeterred. Brian's eyes flicked back, heart pounding as he saw the fin closing in. He summoned every ounce of strength, propelling himself and his family forward. The sand beneath his feet was a welcome relief. With one final surge, he pulled them onto the beach. They collapsed in a tangled heap, gasping for breath. Blood pooled around Emma's leg, staining the golden sand. Luke was pale, his body trembling from shock and blood loss. Brian tore off his shirt, wrapping it tightly around his son's injured torso to stem the bleeding. Emma's vision wavered, but she forced herself to stay conscious. The world around them blurred, the sound of waves fading into a distant roar. Claire, wide-eyed and trembling, stood frozen nearby, tears streaming down her face. A group of beachgoers had noticed the commotion and rushed over. Someone called for help, their voice urgent and panicked. Within minutes, sirens wailed in the distance. Paramedics arrived and their movements were swift and efficient as they stabilized Luke and Emma. As the ambulance sped toward the hospital, Brian held Emma's hand tightly, his knuckles white. Luke lay on a stretcher, his face pale but breathing. The image of the shark's savage attack was etched into their minds, a nightmare they would carry forever. Both Luke and Emma survived, though their recovery was long and arduous. Luke bore scars that would never fade, physical reminders of a terror few could comprehend. Emma's leg required multiple surgeries, but she remained resolute, grateful that her son was alive. The attack became a stark reminder of the ocean's unpredictable nature, a force both beautiful and deadly. Warnings were issued to beachgoers, and local officials increased patrols in the area. The Harris family's harrowing experience served as a cautionary tale for others, a testament to the thin line between serenity and chaos in the wild. Years later, Luke would recount that day with a mixture of awe and fear, his mother's courage forever etched in his memory. And though the ocean continued its timeless dance, the Harris family would never look at it the same way again. Dr. Sophie Lane had spent years studying sharks, diving into the deep blue waters off the coast of California. She had tracked great whites, hammerheads, and tiger sharks. But on June 15, 2023, she focused on mako sharks. These sharks were known for their speed and unpredictable behavior, and Sophie had dedicated the last few weeks to tagging and tracking them for her research. That morning started like any other. Sophie and her team launched their boat from a small harbor near Monterey, California. The sun was just rising as they moved out into open water. The crew of Sophie's research assistants, Jake, Emily, and Victor, checked their equipment carefully. Sophie double-checked her dive gear, knowing that attention to detail could be the difference between life and death in the ocean. By mid-morning, they had reached a known hotspot for mako activity about 10 miles offshore. The ocean was calm, and Sophie felt the usual mix of excitement and focus as she suited up for the dive. The plan was simple: tag a few sharks, record their behavior, and return to the boat. Sophie had done this many times before, and while she respected the dangers, she felt confident in her abilities. Sophie entered the water first, followed by Jake and Emily, while Victor stayed on the boat to monitor from above. The water was cool and clear, perfect for spotting sharks. They descended slowly, their eyes scanning the blue depths for any movement. It didn't take long. Within minutes, Sophie spotted the sleek, torpedo-shaped bodies of several mako sharks gliding through the water. At first, the sharks circled at a distance, curious but cautious. Sophie watched them with awe, noting their powerful movements and sharp angular bodies. She slowly kept her distance and moved to tag one of the smaller sharks using a long pole. The process went smoothly, and the shark darted away after the tag was in place. But as Sophie turned to tag another, she noticed one larger mako behaving differently. It was bigger than the others, over 10 feet long, and wasn't keeping its distance. Instead, it circled closer, its dark eyes locked onto Sophie. She felt a jolt of unease but tried to stay calm. She had encountered curious sharks before. The key was to remain steady, avoid sudden movements, and keep the shark in sight. Sophie signaled to Jake and Emily, letting them know to keep an eye on the shark. But before she could adjust her position, the shark made its move. The mako instantly shot forward with incredible speed, faster than Sophie could react. It clamped down on her right arm with powerful jaws, the sharp teeth cutting through her wetsuit and into her flesh. The pain was immediate and blinding. Sophie's world shrank to the searing agony in her arm and the overwhelming force pulling her deeper into the water. She screamed, but the sound was lost in the water. Blood clouded around her and the shark thrashed, dragging her downward. Sophie's instincts kicked in. She knew she had to fight back. She pounded on the shark's snout with her free hand, aiming for its sensitive nose and eyes. But the shark didn't let go. It shook its head violently, tearing at her arm, the pain shooting through her like fire. Jake and Emily saw what was happening and swam toward her as fast as they could. Sophie could see them coming, but the shark was pulling her farther away, deeper into the ocean, where the light began to fade. She knew she had to act quickly or she wouldn't survive. With every ounce of strength she had left, Sophie reached for the tagging pole strapped to her side. She managed to grip it in her free hand and jabbed it into the shark's eye. The shark recoiled, releasing her arm just long enough for her to break free. But the damage was done. Her arm was torn, the muscle and skin shredded, and blood poured from the wounds. Sophie kicked hard, trying to swim back toward the surface, but the shark wasn't done. It circled back, coming in for another attack. Jake reached her just in time, grabbing her by the shoulder and pulling her upward. Emily was right behind him, swinging her pole at the shark to keep it at bay. The ascent felt endless. Sophie's vision blurred from the blood loss, and every movement sent waves of pain through her body. The shark made one last lunge, grazing her leg with its teeth before Jake shoved it away. They broke the surface moments later, gasping for air. Victor had already thrown a rope ladder over the side of the boat, and he and Emily hauled Sophie aboard. Her arm was a mangled mess, the flesh torn open to the bone. Blood soaked the deck as they wrapped it with whatever they could find. Towels, shirts, anything to slow the bleeding. Sophie drifted in and out of consciousness as Victor radioed for emergency help. The pain was overwhelming, but the fear was even worse. She could still feel the shark's teeth in her arm, the crushing force of its jaws, and the pull of the deep water as it dragged her down. The boat sped back toward shore and Sophie's world faded to black. She woke up in the hospital hours later, her arm heavily bandaged, her body weak from the blood loss. The doctors told her she was lucky to be alive. The shark had missed major arteries by mere inches, but the scars would be permanent, both on her body and mind. Sophie had always respected the ocean and its predators, but the attack forced her to see them differently. She had faced the raw power of one of the ocean's fastest, most unpredictable hunters, and barely lived to tell the story.